This is the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast with Cass Midgley and Marie Delafont.
We interview people you don't know about a subject no one wants to talk about. We hope to encourage people in the process of deconstructing their faith and help curb the loneliness that accompanies it. We think the world is a better place when more people live by sight, not by faith. Please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, you can support us monetarily in 2 easy ways. You can pledge
$1 million
or more through Patreon. That's patreon.com/EA podcast, or leave a lump sum donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. The smallest contribution is greatly appreciated.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 247 of the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. Keep in mind, each of us are going to fall asleep and never wake up someday. This podcast is free to all and free of ads, so a big thanks to each and every one of our Patreon and PayPal supporters. If you've benefited from this podcast, please consider reciprocating that benefit, either by pledging monthly via Patreon or donating a lump sum gift through PayPal. Links to both are at everyone'sagnostic.com. Today, Marie Delafont and I talk with 2 British women, Rebecca Fox and Kat Rose. They're the co-hosts of the podcast, The Seeker and The Skeptic. The Seeker and The Skeptic is a podcast in which these 2 friends explore esoteric, paranormal, and spiritual topics from 2 completely different perspectives. Kat is the seeker. She's interested in spiritual ideas and hopes to find something meaningful and empowering in the wisdom of religion and New Age philosophy. Rebecca is the skeptic. She's passionate about finding truth, or at least getting closer to it, using the tools of reason and evidence. Though their approaches to life and ideas are very different, they share a sense of humor and a commitment to talking honestly about what we believe and why, which is why they started the podcast. In each episode, they discuss a different topic or experience they've had, from holotropic breathing to mediumship, and they'll see if they can learn something from each other or change each other's minds, or if the conversation will devolve into a good-natured slanging match. Whatever happens, they think having these conversations will be enlightening and amusing, and after they finish recording, they'll pour themselves a drink and start planning their next adventure. You can follow them on Twitter and Instagram at Seeker Skeptic. Their website is seekerandskeptic.com. Before our talk with Kat and Rebecca, I want to say a few words. For our new listeners, I'm a 53-year-old ex-Christian pastor. I began honoring my doubts and questions around age 40, and within 5 years, I was a full-blown atheist. Yeah, I'm agnostic, but more accurately, I'm apatheist. I don't care if there are supernatural beings behind this mess in which we find ourselves. If they exist, they suck. The world is far too chaotic, random, and even evil to think that anyone's behind it, let alone a good and moral, smart God. The world operates exactly as it would if there were no interventionary gods. Furthermore, I find Christianity and all theisms to be damaging to humans, because it keeps them from maturing and evolving in ways they would naturally otherwise, were their development not arrested by clinging to a celestial daddy who conveniently offers his children a way out of facing the difficult truths of our reality, namely life and death. The Bible says we can choose between life and death. Not so. Both are upon us, whether we like it or not, as daunting as that sounds. And we would do well, as a species, to wake up and figure out how to best engage with life and death. It is an extremely difficult undertaking being a human being, and it is full of beauty and horror. Life is hard for even the most equipped, healthy, and informed actors. No one comes through unscathed. It's a destructive lie to let go and let God, to not trust one's own understanding, to forfeit planning and responsibility for one's life and choices, The Bible teaches that God knows best for our lives, our behavior, our marriages, our sex, our diets, and ultimately asks us to surrender our autonomy, freedom, and personal agency. Now, that may sound like a relief to those wanting someone else to do the thinking for them, but you never get to truly grow up. Those of us who have escaped religion have been rediscovering and rebuilding our lives, the ones once held prisoner by the grand delusion. And I can say now, 10 years later, that one of the destructive things that Christianity did to my life was unnecessarily complicated. Coming into reality with eyes wide open is both terrifying and exciting. It's a true born-again experience, an escape from the matrix, if you will, a snapping out of the hypnotic stupor imposed by the Christian cult. Now we can sift through our Christian brainwashing history and pan for gold, extract the good, the truths, that which might still serve us, and discard the toxic, much like our digestive system does with food. One reason that people may feel the need for a sky daddy is the impending death of each and every one of us. Dealing with death and grief without the comfort of hiding in the rock of ages, cleft for me, can be terrifying, difficult, really whatever adjective you want to put there. But it doesn't really matter, right? Because it's upon us whether we like it or not. We're going to die. I think we all understand the need to frame that death in a way that gives us comfort and hope. I'm all about regulating anxiety, but I'd rather do it with the best wisdom science has yet gleaned for us, not praying it away to Jesus and waiting for him to fix me, which, by the way, he did every now and then, back when I was a Christian. Believing in a placebo is a powerful testimony to the power of the human brain, not God. This is why yes saying to what is positions us to get up off the floor, doctor our wounds, and ask, okay, what next? That's a question that a surrendered Christian never gets to ask. They've cast all their cares upon Jesus. An example of how religions provide an explanation for something that is otherwise ominous is the afterlife, heaven and hell. I believe that death is exactly like pre-birth, zero consciousness. Maybe we find it difficult to relate to that because our consciousness slowly developed through our first few years on earth, whereas it comes to a screeching halt upon our death. But I believe we won't be aware of our own existence once we're dead, just like we weren't aware before we were born. Honestly, the concept of death really has no subjective meaning, does it? Philosopher Jeff Mason wrote, "Philosophers and non-philosophers stand on a level of equality with respect to death. There are no experts on death, for there's nothing to know about it. Not even those who study the death process have an edge on the rest of us. We are all equals thinking about death. We all begin and end thinking about it from a position of ignorance. Death and its concept are absolutely empty. No picture comes to mind. All we can say about death is that it is either real or it is not real. If it's real, then the end of one's life is a simple termination. If it's not real, then the end of one's embodied life is not true death, but a portal to another life. Philosophers seem to have a vital concern with death and constantly meditate upon it. On the other hand, most people think of nothing so little as death. Perhaps the truth is somewhere in the middle. Ignoring death leaves us with a false sense of life's permanence and perhaps encourages us to lose ourselves in the minutiae of daily life. Obsessive rumination on death, conversely, can lead us away from life. Honestly coming to terms with one's death involves reflection on its significance in one's life and thinking about the larger values that give life its meaning. In the end, it is useful to think about death only to the point that it frees us to live fully immersed in the life we have yet to live." Unquote. One theme that runs through this episode is kind of the live and let live philosophy. All people are free to believe whatever they want, and no one, including themselves, can control or police it. We're also responsible for our own happiness, and we like what we like. Most people are pragmatic about beliefs. Hey, if it works for me, I'm going to use it. Fuck off. And as long as they're not causing any harm, then it's all right to hold that attitude. It is none of my business. I hate to sound elitist, but it's been my experience that people who believe untrue things just haven't thought it through, and that's usually entirely on purpose. They may even know that they haven't thought it through. Some, however, like Stephen Colbert and his Catholicism, may even know where thinking it through leads, and they're just fine to leave it alone. Colbert's a good example of someone who is brilliant and yet holds loosely to his childhood faith, and nobody gets hurt, except maybe those people less self-aware than Colbert, who use his devotion as an excuse to stay in their faith, a faith they might otherwise want to be rid of. Keep in mind that they're probably funding it in some way, which keeps it alive. So sometimes an even benign form of belief is contributing to a larger evil. In a recent interview with Anderson Cooper, Stephen Colbert discusses the tragic loss of his father and 2 brothers in a plane accident when he was 10. Cooper also lost his father at age 10 and his mother, Gloria Vanderbilt, earlier this year. To cope with the grief and trauma, young Colbert escaped into fantasy literature, and I don't think that's insignificant to him remaining a theist. Cooper questioned how Colbert learned to accept tragedy as a way of life. I recommend the whole interview, but here's an 8-minute clip addressing grief.
You wrote me a letter after my mom died, and in it you said, I hope you find peace in your grief. And one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is how we don't really talk about grief and loss. People aren't comfortable talking about it. And one of the things I've found in the last 2 months since my mom died is people coming up to me on the street or reaching out to me in Instagram or wherever and sharing their grief and sharing their loss with me. And I've found that the most helpful thing. I found it to be the most powerful and moving thing. And I kind of oddly don't want that to stop, because in regular times people don't do that. And you've spoken very publicly about what you experienced as a kid, and a lot of it I didn't know. I think a lot of people don't know. So if you don't mind, I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about it and sort of how it has shaped who you are now. Your dad was killed in a plane crash. You were 10 years old, along with your 2 brothers, Peter and Paul. Yeah. And they were the closest brothers to you in age.
Right. It goes Jimmy, Eddie, Mary, Billy, Margot, Tommy, Jay, Lulu, Paul, Peter, Stephen.
You had 11. There were 11 of you.
I'm the youngest of 11. Yeah.
Right. When you lost your 2 brothers, your dad and the boys, as I know you refer to them, most of your other siblings had already left. They were in college. They had families of their own. So it was really just you and your mom.
Yeah, for the most part.
That is a difficult thing. My mom, I talked to Howard Stern about this as well. Howard Stern said he always sort of felt like he had to treat his mom like a china cup, like a china teacup. And I always viewed my mom as a space alien who had landed on this planet and whose ship was immobilized, and I had to protect her and show her how to live in this world. And I felt that until the day she died. And now I look back at it and I realize one of my mom's greatest strengths, which as a kid drove me bananas, was how, despite tragedies and losses, she consciously chose to remain open and vulnerable and optimistic and believing the best in like everybody she met. And I felt like, okay, she can do that because I'm, running interference and I'm scheming and plotting and, willing to do
Any chance that she was doing it because you were there and needed a good example?
I don't think she thought in those terms, to be honest. No, I'm not going to go that far. She wasn't. Your mom, I think, was very parental. My mom was more. She was, an amazing creature. But
because my mom was so shattered by the loss, not destroyed, but shattered by the loss. We used to joke that I raised my mom after the age of 10.
Right. I completely
because I was,
understand.
A child in some ways. Is struck in a different way, but a child's also resilient.
Right.
Their worldview is not fully formed. Now my worldview includes dad and your brothers dying. That's part of the worldview. I'm not at my age now, which is around the age of my father and my mother were when he died. I'm not sure if I could be as resilient. So I don't entirely know how she did it. I had a friend who lost someone recently, lost a child, and she said, "How did your mother do this?" And I said, "I wish she was here to tell you." but it had to do with love, and it had to do with her for loving God. And I have the crucifix on my wall. That was hers when I inherited it when she died, and she would pray to Our Lady and say, she knows what it is to lose a child. And her example of her faith stays with me. And that is we're asked to accept the world that God gives us and to accept it with love. If God is everywhere and God is in everything, then the world as it is all just an expression of God and His love. And you have to accept it with gratitude, because what is the option? What is the option?
You told an interviewer that you have learned to, in your words, love the thing that I most wish had not happened.
I remember.
You went on to say, what punishments of God are not gifts? Do you really believe that?
Yes. It's a gift to exist. It's a gift to exist. And with existence comes suffering. There's no escaping that. And I guess I'm either a Catholic or a Buddhist when I say those things, because I've heard those from both traditions. But I didn't learn it that I was grateful for the thing I most wish hadn't happened, is that I realized it. Is that, and it's an oddly guilty feeling.
It doesn't mean you are happy.
I don't want it to have happened. I want it to not have happened.
Right.
But if you are grateful for your life, which I think is a positive thing to do, not everybody is,
right.
And I'm not always, but it's the most positive thing to do, then you have to be grateful for all of it. You can't pick and choose what you're grateful for. And then, so what do you get from loss? You get awareness of other people's loss.
Well, that's true. Empathy.
Which allows you to connect with that other person.
Right.
Which allows you to love more deeply and to understand what it's like to be a human being, if it's true that all humans suffer.
Right.
And so, at a young age, I suffered something so that by the time I was in serious relationships in my life, with friends, or with my wife, or with my children, is that I have some understanding that everybody is suffering. And however imperfectly, acknowledge their suffering and to connect with them and to love them in a deep way that not only accepts that all of us suffer, but also then makes you grateful for the fact that you have suffered, so that you can know that about other people. And that's what I mean. It's about the fullness of your humanity. What's the point of being here and being human if you can't be the most human you can be? I'm not saying best, because you're going to be a bad person and a most human. I want to be the most human I can be. And that involves acknowledging and ultimately being grateful for the things that I wish didn't happen, because they gave me a gift.
Well, one of the things my mom would often say is that she said, I never ask why me. Like, why did this happen to me? She would always say, why not me? Why would me be exempt from what has befallen everybody, countless others over the centuries? And I think that's another thing that has helped me think, yeah, of course, why not me? This is part of being alive. I mean, this is the suffering is the sadness, suffering. These are all you can't have happiness without having loss and suffering.
And in my tradition, that's the great gift of the sacrifice of Christ, is that God does it too. That you're really not alone. God does it too.
What I hear in Colbert's position on loving the thing that he most wished had not happened is the discipline of saying yes to what is. Remember, that philosophy only applies to those circumstances out of one's control. It's Sisyphus learning to love the rock, because what good would it do for him to hate the rock, or for us to hate our lives? It's all we've got, and I believe overcomers say yes to it. Where Colbert and I part ways is this quote: "What punishments of God are not gifts?" Wherein Cooper the atheist asked him in tears, "Do you really believe that?" After a long pause, Colbert replied, "Yes," later clarifying the quote originated with Lord of the Rings author J.R. Tolkien. I understand and agree with the general premise of this ideology that it's wise to be grateful for existence, aware and accepting of the harsh, chaotic, and painful nature of life. But I have not found a way to simultaneously embrace the brutality of life and the existence of a benevolent, sentient God behind it all who allegedly cares and can do something about it. Instead of being grateful to God for suffering because it builds character and connects people, I discredit God from being God and credit human beings for being overcomers and making the best of this mess. I cannot believe that God is justified in giving us suffering because it makes us more empathetic, assuming we survive the tragedy. Can you not hear how this line of reasoning is desperate to keep God off the hook and looking good? To what length will you go to defend your abuser? And let's not forget that this is two rich white guys talking about their grief. I'm not saying their grief isn't real, but the suffering they incurred has not destroyed their lives by any stretch of the imagination. It's really no wonder that Colbert's okay with God allowing suffering. But tell that theory to a young girl caught up in sex trafficking, getting repeatedly gang raped, physically mutilated, and forever traumatized beyond ever being a healthy participant in society again. And while a vile, stinky 250-pound stranger's on top of her throttling her 11-year-old vulva, she's secretly praying for God to stop this, and has been since the moment she got picked up 2 years ago. I dare you to tell her that she should be grateful for this God-sent gift, and that afterwards she can look forward to being a more empathetic person to others' suffering. Believers tell themselves that God has suffered too, on the cross, but sometimes placing him with or inside the victim. But that doesn't work for me, and it sure as shit won't work for that little girl. I don't need God to share in my suffering, and I don't need him actually to rescue me from my suffering. It's a good thing because he can do neither. I don't need him to exist at all. In fact, everything makes much more sense once God is removed from the picture. And a godless universe is no more lonely than a God-run universe. Either way, it's just us here, us animals. I don't think Colbert believes much when it comes to doctrine. He holds on loosely. It's part of his vocabulary. Maybe he keeps it around to honor his mom. I feel the same way about Obama. Many people avoid claiming to be an atheist because it's not culturally palatable, or they see it as pompous. Here's a bit by Mark Maron on atheists.
Yeah, I don't believe in God, and I don't. It's not because I'm not an atheist. I don't call myself an atheist. I just don't give a shit, really. Is that okay? I mean, I think it's a pretty enviable position to be in because it pisses people off more than atheists. Because, like, if someone goes, "Do you believe in God?" You're like, "No, I don't give a fuck." They're like, "Well, what does that even mean? Pick a side. What the fuck?" Atheists are annoying. They're annoying, and I don't like. I think they just like to. They're control freaks who like to argue. They like to win. They're buzzkill poetry assassins. I don't understand, what it is they're after exactly. And now they think they're the minority voice. They're like, come on, we're the minority voice. We have to have our point of view too. And why isn't our voice out there? Because it's shrill and annoying, and no one really wants to hear it. But that's really the only reason. We understand your point. It's just when you talk about it, we just hate you. And I certainly wouldn't want to have lunch with an atheist because I know where that goes within 10 minutes. I'd be just screaming like, all right, you're right. Shut up. You win. What do you need? And you're not even talking about God. You're just talking about lunch or anything. They're just annoying. Now, my bigger question about atheists is that, has there ever been a moment where they've actually talked a believer out of their God? And what does that moment look like? If that is their agenda, what does that moment look like, given the atheists that perhaps you know? Seriously, all right, I've created an analogy. I picture it going like this. There's some dude just walking down the street. Things have been hard for him. And he's probably thinking like, things aren't going well. But, I got God in my heart, and that makes me feel better. He's like, he gives me hope that things are going to be okay. God's looking out for me. And then out of the bushes jumps an atheist. There's no God. You're living a lie. There's no proof. You believe in a cartoon. It's a delusion, stupid. And then the guy just goes, I never thought about it like that. Oh, no. Oh, I think you're right. There's no God. Everything's just bad. It's just bad. What does an atheist do at that moment? Boom!
Boom! Who wins? Yeah! Oh, I won! I'm gonna go tell my shitty friends.
My point is, there are no atheist soup kitchens. So just shut up. And if there were an atheist soup kitchen, no homeless people would go there. They'd be like, no, they're depressing and annoying. The food's better, but it ain't worth it, man. Let's just go over to where the sisters are and fucking have a warm meal.
One reason that I named this show Everyone's Agnostic is an attempt to find common ground with everyone. Everyone's doing the best they can. Everybody thinks their beliefs are the closest to the truth, or they would change them. Often the need to be right, or the desire for everyone to agree with you, is driven by fear and insecurity, which are destructive to relationships and leading causes of estrangement, distrust, bigotry, violence, and eventually war. Or, as Mark Maron said, insisting that you know something and that you're right is just annoying. But in an era where Christians seem to want to turn America into Gilead and to impose Christian Sharia law, then Christianity is no longer a benign belief held privately by individuals. Sometimes it feels like it's been weaponized to destroy everything in its path to world domination. So I think it's important to advertise for atheism, to say it out loud, I'm an atheist, without being a dick. Ironically, by doing so, we may help create a society where it's no big deal what a person believes, and all fundamentalists of any kind, even atheists, will have dialed it back, loosened up on their certainty and need to be right, and begin to see that our need for superstitious explanations for difficult truths need not keep us in emotional infancy. Until then, these are our brothers and sisters, fighting their own battles, and everyone's doing the best they can. It can be no other way.
I really enjoyed this interview with Rebecca and Kat that we recorded in April. Obviously, it's now August, and much has changed. Since April, I have come into contact with more seekers in my life. I've made some dear friends who are extremely passionate about helping people recover from religion. And they believe in tarot cards, chakras, and energies. Honestly, just a year or two ago, I don't know that I could have been connected to people like that. Moreover, just in the last few months, I've made friends with people who are still going to a kind of church and identify as cultural Christians, but who remain very progressive about their beliefs. Yes, I feel a mild judgment when I encounter these people. I think, man, you've come so far, just a few more steps. But I have given these people a chance, and I find their beliefs to be helpful for them as they make sense of the world and look for meaning. There can be an argument made, and there is an argument made in this episode by Rebecca about the danger of such beliefs. And yes, that is an argument with merit, and nonetheless, my religious trauma flare-up is kind of reducing as I'm able to honor these remaining spiritual beliefs of otherwise really lovely people who are also suffering from religious trauma. And my thought is that I can't convince them of my view, and moreover, they aren't evangelizing their views, taking advantage of other people, nor being dogmatic about it at all. So, regardless of their views being something so distant and unrelatable for me, I am finally able to embrace these spiritual people as they are amazing friends to me, honor my path and where I've landed in life, and we're able to discuss it respectfully. And I think that's exactly what Rebecca and Kat show us in this upcoming episode. I hope you enjoy it. But first, a few announcements. Last week, I was on Secular Sexuality. It is a show produced by the atheist community of Austin. If you go to YouTube and search for Secular Sexuality, Marie Delafont, you can see me talking about designer relationships. People tell me I did good, so go watch it and confirm that indeed I did good. Also, my buddy Dave Warnock was on several different shows this weekend as well, on Atheist Community of Austin, on the show Truth Wanted, Talk Heathen, and The Atheist Experience. Additionally, I preached at Revolution Church, the church that is led by Jay Baker. If you want to check out that, I talk about my journey to atheism in a church. What the hell? And so to learn more about our podcast, you can head over to everyone'sagnostic.com, where you can learn more about Cass and me. You can look through podcast merchandise and find links to other shows that we've been guests on. You can also email us at everyone'sagnostic@gmail.com. And you can also follow us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you want to get more involved with our community, you can ask to be added to our private Facebook group, our virtual support group, and or our sexuality discussion group. And lastly, I'm just going to go ahead and plug myself. If you are seeking life coaching specifically regarding monogamous and non-monogamous relationships or toxic religion, or if you are in need of a virtual assistant, reach out. Let's connect. Email me at mariedelefant@gmail.com. That is Marie, D as in dog, elephant @gmail.com. And enough of that. So now, join Cass and I as we interview Rebecca and Kat from the Seeker and The Skeptic podcast. All right, are we still on?
I'm here.
We're here.
Sweet.
Everybody's here.
Okay. I was going to apologize for being late, but I'm early, so I'm not apologizing.
You're 1 minute early, yeah.
4 minutes early, too.
Oh, my clock says 10:29. What time is it there, Rebecca?
It's 4:30 in the evening. Well, afternoon.
Okay. So I don't know, Marie, if you know, but I had Rebecca on years ago, and we did her show, her episode, and then she came to Nashville for some reason.
Oh.
And we met for dinner, her and her husband. And so I've met Rebecca face to face, hung out. She's met my kids.
We went to see LP. It was amazing.
Yeah, they do this live on the Green thing in Nashville every Thursday in the fall, I think. And I don't know if you're familiar with the artist LP.
Mm-mm.
But one of her main songs, what is that song? I can't.
You think you've Lost on You?
Yeah, Lost on You. Yeah, that's the song that a lot of people know, but she's amazing live, and she's quite
But I never heard of her before. Cass suggested to go and see her, and I was like, oh, okay, if he thinks she's good, she's probably good. And then I was just blown away.
We had a good time, and it was a short little visit, but it's just amazing to meet guests of the show, especially when they live
so far away
on the other side of the big, what do they call it? The big blue. I don't know.
The pond?
The pond?
Across the pond?
Yeah, across the pond. That's the term I'm looking for.
So are you both in the UK then?
I'm in Portland.
Kat's over there with you.
Yeah.
What? Okay, so Kat's in Oregon.
Yep.
And Rebecca, you're in the UK?
Yeah, in the countryside in the south.
Okay. I'm going to be very distracted by your accent. It's so beautiful.
Oh, Kat's is even nicer than mine. Let her speak for a bit.
Okay, go ahead, Kat.
I feel really awkward speaking with an English accent around Americans. I try to accommodate. So I try to start saying, sidewalk instead of pavement and stuff like that.
An elevator.
Talking another language. Yeah.
Water it down a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly.
What do you guys call an elevator?
Lift.
A lift, yeah. And then apartment is a flat.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like everything. If you when you notice it when you're speaking to Americans, you just suddenly all these words that seem normal to you, you see them looking at you with their eyes like, what the fuck does that mean?
Exactly. I'm trying to remember, there was an interview I listened to recently where somebody called, oh fuck, I can't remember. It was one of those other examples of just a weird word that a different country uses for, well, it's not weird, it's just relatively different, but it's always fun to learn those.
Yeah.
I was just having a party at my house last night, and people were arguing over the pronunciation of what word was it? It's just so arbitrary, and even within the Midwest of the US, people are having these heated debates about how to pronounce one fucking word in English. I'm like, oh my God, calm down.
There was one that was yesterday. I was talking about chamomile tea, but I think people over here say chamomile.
Yeah.
Yep, they do.
You know, like, which just little things like that. I had no idea.
Oh, I've never heard chamomile before.
No, that's a new one to add to the books.
That's because I don't drink those hippie drinks that you love.
Hippie drinks.
Well, we got Rebecca's story back on episode 160. Kat, do you have a religious background at all?
Well, I was raised Catholic. So I went to a Catholic school, and when I was 16, I found out that my dad used to be a priest. So I guess there's definitely a religious background in the family. Yeah.
Huh.
So did he pass away, or how did you have some kind of retro?
No, when he was in his 20s, he left Ireland, because basically in Ireland, at that time, you had two choices. You either become a farmer or a priest. And he chose the latter. But then he, I guess he had his own doubts. And he and some friends, so it's not like he was the only one. Many people, what it sounds like, just stopped being priests, maybe in their 20s. And he met the man who is my mum's brother. Nothing weird happened there, but he through him met my mum, and the rest is my family.
Yeah.
The rest is history.
How many siblings you have?
3. So 2 older sisters and 1 older brother.
Okay.
It's not like the massive Catholic family, but it's pretty big. Yeah.
Well, were you ever devout? Like, did you ever believe?
For sure. I mean, I think as a kid, you believe what you're told, or at least I did. And it wasn't until I was sort of around 13, 14, when we were asked, this is the time that you choose, you can make your confirmation. It's not really a choice. It was assumed that we would make it. And I didn't, I think as a sort of, grumpy teenager, that's when I was questioning it, because I thought, if we're meant to have a choice here, what are the other choices? Oh, there are other religions. How do I know that this is the right one? Why am I being forced to do this ceremony? I guess that's when the questions started, and I didn't get a good answer. And so I just assumed, oh, right, not everyone is Catholic. Maybe I don't have to be one either. I still went ahead and, pleased the parents and made the confirmation. But
instead of becoming a full-blown atheist, you've remained rather agnostic and open-minded, and thus the premise for your guys' podcast, Kat is the seeker and Rebecca is the skeptic.
That's it.
Yeah, and proud.
A proud skeptic.
And a proud seeker, I think.
Yes, definitely.
I was going to say, you're probably a proud seeker too.
So what keeps your mind open? I guess just some kind of need for something to be, real here, other than just a giant mistake, scientific accident?
Yeah, I haven't been convinced about any argument. I can't help but think, even if there is, it's just, I mean, I would say that it's the same as skepticism, right? It's keeping your mind open. It's just that I haven't made any firm decisions. I'm not as decisive. I guess there is part of me that, naturally wants to believe. I think it was hard letting go of certain things, like the idea of heaven. Like, heaven's a really nice thing if you're having a sucky time here on earth. Yeah. So questioning that was hard, but equally, a lot of things, it's kind of, I found easier to not have to believe in certain things. Yeah.
All of a sudden, I'm just thinking of like the Bachelorette show or game or whatever, where you have a choice of 3 guys, Bob, Dave, and Doug, and you reject all 3 of them, but you don't just assume that there's no one else out there in the world for you. And so, like, we can reject Allah, Jehovah, Buddha, or whatever, or Krishna, or I don't know, whatever, all the man-made gods. But just to leave that door open for maybe there's someone out there for me.
I think it's true. And I think a lot of what we're doing with the show is looking at different things and saying, can we take something from this that's helpful and improves our life?
Yeah.
That's so true. And even as the skeptic, that's what I'm doing too, really. I want to see what's left after I take away everything that's scientifically implausible and see if there's anything that is comforting and fulfilling and enriching to my life. And I do find bits and pieces here in different experiences we have. So it's really funny to be the seeker and the skeptic, although it is very fitting and it's nice with the, the two S's, makes for a nice title. But sometimes I feel like we're switching in between and we're getting closer together and further apart.
Yeah.
Like the blurring between seeker and skeptic is always something we discuss.
I was going to say that, like, I wasn't super sure what the difference between the words might be, because a skeptic doesn't mean that they're not seeking answers or they're not open-minded. They're just, you can be a seeker and a skeptic.
Yeah, exactly. It's something we go back and forth on.
Yeah.
We haven't really figured out. I think we're figuring out as we go along, as we record.
Yeah.
But for me, skepticism is scientific skepticism, as in that whole movement, which is basically looking through ideas and things I encounter in the world and claims that are made about the world and seeing whether there's reason and evidence to back them up. And if there isn't, then for example, I'm an atheist because I don't think there's evidence to back up the idea in God. Technically, I'm an agnostic. And that's one of the reasons I love the title of your show and the whole premise of your show. Yeah. But because there's no evidence, I go with the null hypothesis of God not existing. And when we go to these topics, whether it's like, mediumship, or we saw a guy who channeled the Archangel Michael and some Palladian aliens from the Pleiades star system. We've been in these big pyramids where you're supposed to absorb the power from them and recharge your spiritual batteries, all these things. If they can't give me evidence, then I will say I do not believe. Yeah. Whereas I think Kat is more likely to say there's no evidence, you could go either way.
Exactly.
And then decide which way she wants to go.
And often I will lean on the side of, so once I'm deciding which way I want to go, then it's like, well, which makes me feel good? And this is what I think the debate between us comes down to, because sometimes Rebecca will say, well, what if you believe this? And, we'll follow on to a conclusion that could be risky. Whereas I'm a little bit more, it's fine. I can believe that these crystals work. There is no downside.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, you have to consider, like, I think it's really interesting when people, at least if I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, let me know. But like when people are like, they look at the crystals and they like them and they use them and whatever. But if you ask them about it, they'll be like, well, I don't really know if they work or not, but it doesn't really hurt. Maybe maybe they're spending money on it, but I don't know, it's fun. They like it. It gives them a ritual, it gives them some kind of a purpose, something to do, something to vent vent something about themselves through. And ultimately, like, and if they have a mild awareness that they're not really sure if it works or not, I can see that, like if it doesn't really hurt them and it adds some kind of purpose or a way to contextualize the world around them, maybe there's no harm in that.
Well, it's always my role to be the sarcastic, grumpy spoil sport. So I'll continue that tradition and say something like, I get what you mean, like, obviously, and I used to be into all of that stuff, so I understand how fulfilling it is and how beautiful it is. And, there's lots of wonderful things to be said for a nice piece of quartz put out under the full moon. But what worries me is that there are people making medical claims about what crystals can do. And so you putting your crystal out under the full moon and having a great time and thinking this is kind of a bit of ritual, it's a bit of play, it's a bit of fun. That's fine for you, but you're contributing to the belief that these things have magical powers, and that belief does real, like, demonstrable harm to people who are trying to be cured, trying to cure cancer with crystals and all sorts of silly things. And I think, like, you have to think about how the sort of network effect of contributing to a belief in the magical power of crystals or herbs or homeopathy or any of these things, how that works in society. So I don't think it's quite as simple as saying, well, it doesn't hurt me, so why not?
No, I agree.
Yeah, it's difficult.
That's super intriguing. Like, I would never think about, should I believe this or not, based on whether, if I believe it, it affects society. Like, I don't know if that's just like our individualist kind of Western culture that we're just fixated on ourselves, or if because I'm having a hard time getting my head to that point where I consider whether a belief is good or not based on if other people believed it, if it would impact them negatively. Like, my brain is just like, well, fuck them. Like, whatever it does for me it's exclusively about me. And like the idea of considering other people feels like owning other people's experiences and behaviors. And at the same time, I kind of understand what you're saying. So I'm kind of like torn in the middle because I can kind of see it. And at the same time, I'm like, nah, fuck them, you know?
Maybe if you thought about it on a smaller scale, like, for example, if you're my friend and you do the crystal thing, and I'm like, oh, that's an interesting hobby that Marie has with the crystals and everything. And then I come down with some very serious condition. And I go and I look at the different options for treating that condition. And I see some people are saying crystal healing works. And I think to myself, do I really think crystals really, I mean, it's a bit dodgy. I'm not sure. And then I look around my social circle and I think, well, Marie seems very sensible and she uses crystals. So, I mean, these are the sort of ways we make decisions about our lives, right? And if we've never sat down and had the conversation where you've explained, oh, it's just a bit of fun, really, and it's a ritual, then you're kind of a proponent for the magic powers of crystals. And if you don't genuinely think they have magic powers, I think that's a kind of dicey place to be.
I don't know. Like, I hear what you're saying, and I'm sure there's like other examples where I don't know. Oh man, that's a really that's an idea full of tension. What were you going to say, Cass?
Well, I've got an example, a story I used to tell, and it was said of a visitor once came to the home of Nobel Prize winning physicist Niels Bohr, and the guest noticed that there's a horseshoe hung above the entrance, and so he asked the professor, if, do you believe in this? And Bohr said, no, but I'm told that they bring good luck to even those who do not believe in them. So in a way, he puts it up there telling himself, oh, no, I don't believe in it, but someone else does. And so, or at least they're supposed to work whether you believe in them or not.
Couldn't hurt.
And it's laughable. And I do, like Mike, recently, we just got a new dog about a year and a half ago. And it turns out, and he was found. He was running around, and we found him, and we tried to find the master or owner, and couldn't. And so we kept it. But we timed back, and it was about the time that my dog of 15 years died. This dog was born right around the same week or time. And so the joke in our house is that Jack is the reincarnation of Polo.
Aww.
And it's a pleasant little laughable thing. And sometimes I wonder, that we use it so much that it seems like my daughter might actually even be like, it's my story and I'm sticking to it. Whereas it's literally meaningless. Well, and it's impossible to me. I don't believe in it. But anyway, I guess are we talking about how harmless some things are, or if it's just by holding it lightly, you're still contributing to a culture who perpetuates it and uses it legislatively, and that thus you're contributing to the toxicity and the danger of it.
Yeah, it's a bit of both, and depending on which topic we're covering in each show, they vary. And I realize I am being the extreme skeptic when I raise concerns about harms of this kind of cultural harms. But some of the things that we talk about do have like just very basic, literal, demonstrable harms when people are saying that they can cure certain diseases with things, or like the pyramid power people have lots of claims that if you sit in their pyramids, you can cure all sorts of diseases. So yeah, I'm willing to bend and consider, hey, okay, fine, it might be a bit of fun on certain things. But generally, I think I have a different conception of belief than Kat does. I really think that it's important to believe things that are as close to the truth as possible. And I think it's almost like I'm not even sure whether that's a part of my personality or something I think maybe because I did have such a strange past, which anyone who listened to the show I did before with Cass and Bob will know about. Like, I was really caught up in a lot of strange beliefs, and it really helped me personally to come to a place where I base my beliefs on reason and evidence. So maybe I'm a little bit evangelical on certain things, more inclined to see harm than perhaps the average person would be.
Well, you know what this reminds me of, Rebecca, now that I'm thinking about it? Like, I was raised evangelical. A lot of the times I was in a private religious school, surrounded by Christians at school, surrounded by Christians at church, all Christians around me all the time. And I was one of those people that took it extremely seriously. They said, metaphorically, they said the crystals take away the cancer. And I was like, whoa, that's cool. I'm definitely going to get them crystals. I'm definitely going to like try to heal my cancer that way. And like I bought into all the messages. And now years later, as I'm looking back and sometimes I'm connecting with people that I was growing up with at that time in the church or at school, at private school. And I talk to them about our experiences together. I'm learning that a lot of them didn't really believe it. Like, nobody really took it as seriously as I did. And so now this is starting to kind of resound with me that there was this culture of, what's the word I'm looking for? That everyone agreed with it. There was this culture of looking like everyone was on the same page about something, but they weren't really. Everyone was just kind of like silently like, okay, let's just do this, I guess. And no one was saying anything. And meanwhile, people like me who have a personality where they really just want to throw themselves into the truth and really just do their best with everything, just believed that everyone around me believed it. And I'm just going to throw myself in. And then I ended up getting really fucking hurt because I got into the dark end, the deep end of Christianity, evangelical stuff. I just sometimes feel like nobody else took it as seriously as I did. And they all kind of knew. They kind of knew. But like nobody really told me. Like no one was like, "Oh no, it's just a thing that adults do. They just talk about it." You know what I mean? Like so, I think I'm kind of
exactly.
I'm kind of starting to understand what you're saying.
I think there's people like us. We're kind of the literal people, and the people like you say who really want to throw themselves into what they believe and to try and believe true things. And we're like vulnerable to this sort of this kind of theater of ritual. Because we just assume that everyone is being truthful when they say they believe in God or, you know, what crystals or anything. We just think, well, okay, well, they're saying it must be true. And then they're the ones who end up going, as you say, into dark places and risking our health, but with strange health treatments and, going into the sort of evangelical Christianity stuff, which can be very harmful, especially if you don't fit the mold. So,
yeah. And then you go back and talk to them and they're like, oh my God, really? You took that seriously? I'm like, dude, yeah. I moved to Mexico. Why didn't you take it seriously? Everyone else went to college and I was like, what are you doing? We need to save souls. Like I was the only one taking it seriously. That's what they were telling us. How was that not the logical conclusion?
This is so funny because this is exactly one of the issues that comes up so often in like every topic we cover. And Kat explains the way that she feels about beliefs, and it is what you're describing. I mean, Kat, speak for yourself.
Yeah, it's almost like playing make believe as an adult. It really is, and we're all kind of playing, like you said, this kind of theatrical role. And yeah, it goes unsaid. And I saw that a lot in the Catholic Church as well. And I was just thinking about my own family. And it's kind of like, even my mum, she'll, give money to the church every Christmas. But if you really dug into it, like, do you really think that, Jesus was a man who was killed and came back 3 days later and like ascended into heaven? She'd be like, well, it's what we say we believe and what we actually believe are two different things. And similarly, I could say that I don't believe in ghosts officially, but will I, check under my bed if I've just watched a scary movie? Yes. So it's really interesting. I'm really interested in like what belief actually is for us and what we actually believe. Because it's not clear.
Yeah, this is how I relate to this is, and this is just another example that like when I went to Bible camp, like that was in the early 90s, late 90s, and they were giving us a lot of those messages about purity culture and like no kissing before you got married, shit like that, which I took extremely seriously. And then again, years later, I'm going back and I'm talking to kids that I went to Bible camp with, and they're like, oh yeah, we were fucking in the woods. I'm like, what? How did I miss out on this? They were like, well, you were a goody two-shoe. I'm like, but like, why did I believe all that?
I just recently did a survey of 850-ish atheists or former believers, people who've let go of beliefs is the way I framed it. And one of the things I asked them is to answer a series of questions, which gives you a score on what's called the Santa Clara Strength of Religious Faith Belief scale. So I was really interested to see whether these people, according to this scale that sociologists and people who study religion use, whether the atheists are more religious, less religious, somewhere in the middle. I was kind of hoping for, one end or the other, because it makes a better story when I'm talking about the results. And what I found was they came out dead center. We're exactly average. People who have let go of beliefs are right in the middle of this scale, and exactly average. And I was thinking about that and how disappointing it was, because it would have been more fun if it was more dramatic if it was at either end. And I thought maybe that makes sense, because the people who really believe never question it, and the people who only believe weakly also never question it because they don't have the reason to, because it's not important to their lives.
Only believe weakly. I love that.
Yeah, this is how the sociologists talk about it. So if you have a weak belief, it doesn't affect your life that much. There's no reason to question it. There's no reason to take it very seriously. And this is kind of the people maybe that we're talking about when we talk about sort of theatrical, ritualistic, belief. And then the people who believe really strongly, they're in it for life. It's very intense to them, very real, and they never question it for obvious reasons. So the people who are scoring average are the ones who are most likely to start questioning their beliefs, because they're taking it to some degree seriously, but not so seriously that they won't allow themselves to have doubts.
Yeah.
Have either of you studied evolution to any degree?
Not beyond reading a couple of books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't believe in it. No, I'm kidding. I was reading a book recently which started to question evolution. I did stop reading, not because of that, but I would like to pick it back up and see like, what doubts do people have about that? Yeah.
Well, and the reason I ask is I haven't done much. And when it comes to stuff that's just way over my head, in a sense, I kind of have a little bit of faith in the experts. So I don't have time to read the book, but they have PhDs, and what would they have to gain, from lying to me? So there's a lot of things that I'd take, for example, climate change. I trust the scientists. I've never studied it myself, but I believe them. I believe that, 98% of them say it's not only happening, but it's man-made. So I'm going to err on the side of trusting people who know more and have more letters behind their name than I do. So anyway, so when I was a kid, and this is, I think one of the reasons why, like, the majority of the human race currently, and I think that number's dropping, thank the Lord, but most people just go, oh yeah, there has to be a God. I mean, it's just almost like the assumption, and you have to prove, whereas we know that the onus is on them to prove. But anyway, just a walk in the woods, or just nature itself is so complex. And I think like intelligent designers use this like irreducible complexity argument as far as it's just the birds I sit out on my front porch, and it's like they're chirping away, they're making babies, they're building nests, and it all seems to be on autopilot, but yet it is a very beautiful, I mean, and ugly. We know life is, obviously mean and ruthless and chaotic, but just if you, the whole complexity of the eyeball, all these arguments, it's easy to err on the side of like, okay, yeah, there's no way that this is just an accident that happened over billions of years, and here we find ourselves. And so I don't know. Does that have any resonance with you as far as like one of the reasons why you keep the door open?
100%, actually. And when you're describing that, I just can't help but think this is how I feel about most things that, science claims to be, the current view on things. Like, here's how far we've got with science. This is the truth now. I can't help but question that and hold it. But I think the difference between me and Rebecca is I probably hold that even looser, but I hold other things a little bit more almost on par with that.
Well, and also the difference between science and, say, religion is science would beg you to question it. They welcome your questions, and they question themselves. That's the whole scientific method, is peer reviewed and such. Whereas religionists and, religions are held up by the very rejection of questions and saying that you can't do this. In fact, we used to say a thing in Christianity that went like this: you don't want to be so open-minded that your brain falls out. and now I would say that I would say that to even like maybe somebody like yourself, Kat, to where you've left it open. You're a seeker, And as we've described, there's a lot of harmlessness to just saying, no, I'm just going to hold that one loosely, and I'm not going to close the door on that. I'm not. It's an open case. The jury's still out, and I don't have to close the case, and so I'm going to leave it open. But again, the back in Christianity, that warning, instead of it being something that was a safeguard against credulity, it was a safeguard against entertaining your own doubts or thinking for oneself. And it was, like all the scriptures say, it pleased God to make the wisdom of the world foolishness to the wise. So and you guys are both smart, and all of us in this room are smart enough to just have some questions and some thoughts. And the Bible would say, well, in order for you to get into the kingdom, you have to become humble. You have to become like a child. You have to become naive almost, and to get through the narrow pathway of that you have to humble yourself. And so you think you know everything, but God made it so that it would be a stumbling block to that very pride and that very know-it-all human arrogance. You're gonna keep yourself out of the kingdom just by thinking that you know everything. You've got to shut down some of that skeptical thinking, or you're never going to make it with Jesus.
I think that you're right. It's definitely more frowned upon in religions to question things, but that in itself, this idea of like humility, I love that, and I think some scientists aren't living by that. I don't think it's only religious people who are kind of holding on with a tight grip to their beliefs. I do think a lot of scientists do that, and I know for sure that archaeologists really do that. And this is kind of where we get into the territory of like conspiracy theories. And I think a lot of people who have gone so far off the other end and maybe so far in the skepticism end have landed with, let's just question everything. Yeah, we said the earth was flat, then we said it was round. Hey, what if it was flat again? It's like there's a limit to our what we can question.
Well, I think the thing about skepticism as opposed to just questioning is that the questions they're coming from a certain framework, and they're what's the word? They're like structured questions. They're questions with a sort of integrity where we're looking for the falsifiability criteria for everything. We want to know what the evidence is. We want to know the reason, and we want to check everything stacks up. But that sort of endless questioning where you're just left with nothing but sort of formless doubts, which often makes people feel very frightened, understandably, because they have nothing solid left in their world. I mean, that might be philosophical skepticism, but that's not the sort of skepticism that I'm into. That's a bit intense for my liking.
Yeah.
This kind of reminds me of like what Trump was doing when Obama was in office. Like, if we're talking about the framework of creating these hypotheses, and testing truths,
that border on conspiracy theories.
Yeah, he's just like, he's not from the U.S. Yeah, he did this, and he's just making up all these random lies. And you'd be like, dude, what? And people would challenge him on it. He'd be like, hey, I'm just asking questions. All he's got to do is show his birth certificate. And it's like, that is not a well-framed accusation or thing to test. Like, where, like. So I think that's what you're trying to, if that's what you're trying to say, Rebecca, like having a what am I trying to say? Like a good hypothesis.
Yeah.
Like going back and saying that the planet is flat again is ridiculous.
It's asking questions which will get you closer to truth, as opposed to asking questions which will just destabilize everything and make everyone confused. And I mean, he's done a good job of that as far as I can understand over there. So the other thing I noticed, it was similar in how Cass was describing the way Christians talk about doubts. We see that a lot in New Age culture. A lot of the places we've been on for the podcast, a lot of places we've been to, they will tell you to shut down your thinking mind and just let your intuition guide you. And I understand that a lot of people are very disconnected from their emotions, and it's probably a very useful message for some people. But for me, I'm kind of an anxious, neurotic person. I don't think I should let my intuition guide me. And having been told to shut down my thinking mind, that's one of the things that's like a massive red flag when they just say, well, just let it go, just feel it and believe it and let it flow through you. I'm like, oh, no, thank you.
Yeah. So Kat, would you say that you're familiar with The Secret or the what is it, the law of attraction?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in my stair steps out of Christianity, I went from just being a fundamental Christian evangelical to new agey, a little bit Oprah, a little bit, I don't believe in hell. I don't believe that Jesus was any more the Son of God than you and I. Might have been a guy, might have been a teacher. Some of it is good, but so I just began to find truth wherever I could find it. And I got pulled into The Secret for just long enough, 6 months or something, to where I was practicing it. One of those things where you put it up on your bathroom mirror. So every day when you're getting ready, you see all these motivational quotes like what you think about, you bring about. And I think there's some truth to a person setting goals or being mindful. Say I get out of bed and I literally am a dud. I just want to go watch TV and I just stay in my robe all day versus I have decided that I want to finish my degree, for example, or I want to become a painter. And so what I think about, I do bring about, so there's a truth to intentionality in a person, and sometimes it's mistaken as like supernatural or magical, and that's just a fine line. I don't know, does that?
It really does. That resonates a lot with me because I was really interested in Abraham Hicks, which you may have come across.
No, I mean, is he part of one of those guys they interviewed on The Secret?
Actually, they got cut from the movie, and I'm not entirely sure why, but basically it's a woman who is channeling something called Abraham. But in short, what is interesting is the stuff that she says is really great advice for life. It's just if you put it in the frame of actually, okay, I'm going to believe that she's actually channeling another entity. Obviously, that's not for everyone, and that's not necessarily what I believed. But like you're saying, you can still find some value in a lot of these ideas, and it's not usually because of what they're saying. For example, the idea of sitting in a circle, like when we went to do this ayahuasca ceremony, I really loved this idea of being in a circle. There seems to be something powerful about humans sitting around like that, and you see it in all these different tribes. And it's not necessarily because the circle itself is sacred or magical or spiritual or anything. It's just, it's nice to connect with other humans. And it still has this positive benefit.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, not necessarily for supernatural reasons.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what I'm trying to find. It's like, what are those things that are useful?
Yeah, it makes me think of like, how do you hack your mind in like a secular way?
Yeah, because the problem is if all these hacks are presented through a lens of spiritual or religious teachings, then they bring a lot of bad baggage with them. Like The Secret, I mean, everything Cass is saying about it putting you in the right mindset to achieve your goals, all that's great. But the weird thing about The Secret is the idea that people get what they deserve. I don't like that idea. I find that really troubling when you think about people who are having really hard lives. I don't want to believe they got what they would deserve, that we all make our own destinies or whatever. We haven't actually done an episode on the Secret yet, but we should definitely put that on the list. So yeah, it's like, and that's kind of what I think, like, is there a way to just take the stuff that is valuable and leave the stuff that is not evidence-based and potentially dangerous behind? And this is always the struggle that we have of trying to extract what's valuable and leave behind everything else.
So I just Googled Esther Hicks, and she wrote the book Abraham, The Secret Behind the Secret. But there's a couple of videos that popped up, and one of the titles of the video is "Welcome to the Next Level of Appreciating Yourself." And it's like you said, Kat, it's like, well, gosh, if you teach me to accept myself more than I already do, hell yeah, I'll take that all day long, because I think it's really helpful and takes my life to another level or whatever. But that's common sense. I mean, not common sense, but it just doesn't have to be supernatural. In fact, I mean, Marie and I, we've referred to this outsourcing word when it comes to Christianity. There's no good in us as Christians. We are deplorable wretch, empty, and there's no good in us, and nothing can come from us except whatever God puts in us. So we had to defer and credit and glorify God for every good thing that we ever did. And so we outsourced our goodness. And I think one of the things that I hear you being cautious of, Rebecca, is when somebody says, okay, just open your mind and let it take over. No. I've done that before. I have ceded over. I have given over, surrendered over my will and volition and agency to someone else before, even though it was an invisible friend. No more. I'm not going to do that anymore. And so I know that we're all a little bit skeptical, and hopefully we're guarded. and have a healthy level of suspicion about our own propensity to be meaning making, storytelling, pattern seeking, and how much when we walk into something, and this is true of scientists as well, and that's hopefully there's some systems built in, but they have a hypothesis, they have something that they want to be true, need to be true, hope it's true, and so they go in with all this pre-existing bias, and this healthy level of suspicion and self-doubt and questioning, protects us from our own credulity to wish something into existence. Don't bother me with the facts.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that I think has been most helpful that Rebecca's shared with me, is this idea that our minds have these natural propensities to do certain things, like you said, the pattern seeking, and it's so easy just to let our minds do what they naturally want to do. But being aware of those, being aware of these cognitive biases, that has been really helpful for me.
That's really sweet. I was just about to say what these conversations with Kat has done for me is allow me to be skeptical of my skepticism and to try and find value in these things, and to realize that, that Kat's a sensible person and she has beliefs that I don't share. What's that about? That's interesting. Maybe there's something for me there. And it's definitely allowed me to be a bit more flexible about what I believe and hold my ideas more lightly, probably be less of like a strict thinking of everything in the terms of science. I'm more accepting now of like the value that imagination plays in my life, for example, and ritual, as we were saying earlier. So yeah, I think you almost need one of those people. Everyone needs, if you're a skeptic, you need a seeker, and vice versa, to just keep you honest and to keep you questioning, not just the things that you're presented, that the world presents you with in your day-to-day life, whether that's like, I don't know, some crazy idea about energy channels running through the earth, ley lines, that was one of our episodes, or, some things that Jordan Peterson said, we did an episode about him, or witchcraft, which was my thing back in the day, but not just being skeptical about those things that come up in life, but being skeptical about our approach to life and our approach to how we think about things. And you can only really get that in dialogue with another person.
Yeah. Well, y'all are just having a good old time there, making each other better people.
It's the name of the game.
Or slowly breaking each other. I don't know.
Yeah.
This makes me think about meditation, like every therapist that I talk to, that I explain, like, hey, I've got this panic disorder, I've got this anxiety disorder, I've got this religious trauma. And they're like, oh, yeah, you need meditation. I'm like, stop saying that. Like, because meditation, I think, is something that is really strictly spun as something spiritual, or like, even if it's just very generically spiritual, like they'll use really vague words that don't really actually mean anything. Like, just really arbitrary words that nobody really agrees on what it means. There's not a concrete definition. And so whenever I am like curious about looking into meditation, when I see those words, I'm like hardcore triggered. I'm like, nope. Like that's that shutting down. That's that refusal to give up my critical thinking or my guard or my skepticism. And which is really disappointing, because I think what we're talking about here is that a lot of these spiritual, supernatural things that people are coming across might have some amount of truth to it. Whether that truth is about our humanity, generally it's about our humanity, the way that we work, the things that resonate for us, that work for us. And there's something about meditation, and it's, for me, I don't think it's anything spiritual. I don't think it's anything outside of synapses and chemicals and stuff and just the way that we are. And I would love to learn about that. What is meditation in a strictly scientific way? Why does it work for us? And instead of people telling me to notice my thoughts, can we talk about it in a different way that feels more concrete, instead of making my mind into a dualistic being where there's a watcher and then there's a thinker? Because I'm done with dualism. Because I'm really frustrated with that, because I know it would help me, but like this stuff that I'm carrying with me of being very resistant against any kind of wooey sorts of language keeps me away from meditation, because I don't have anyone to explain it to me in a way that I can be comfortable with, because there's just way too many of those buzzwords. And I mean, Sam Harris came out with a book. I can't remember what it's called. Did any of you read it? It was about meditation, but kind of a very secular way of talking about it.
Waking up.
Yeah, thank you. And I only got like a chapter or two through it, and then I got distracted. But I'm glad it's there, because I think it probably talks about it in that kind of way.
We have
I
a show
think-
about we have a show about meditation coming up. So we've actually dug into quite a lot of the research on this.
Hey, okay. I'm super excited to listen to that. Everyone check that out. If you resonate with what I just said, check that episode coming out. That's
because
awesome.
we're both meditators. I mean,
Yeah.
try to keep up regular practice, but we come at it from different angles. So
Yeah. That's cool. Oh, okay. I'm like super stoked now. Okay.
And also check out Dan Harris's work as well. Not related to Sam Harris, but he also does a lot of secular mindfulness stuff.
Yeah, his book 10% Happier.
yeah, that's it's a good secular introduction to meditation. Meditation is a very strange thing, and I think at the moment there's so much hype around it. And I mean, it won't surprise you guys to hear I'm a little bit skeptical.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think probably it's something that works for a lot of people, but probably not everyone. And the problem with something that's when it's having its moment, it people tend to become a bit evangelical about things and be like, this will fix everything, this will fix all of your problems. And you can see the same thing about therapy, right? Whichever therapy someone has just been to, they're like, why not try this? And it's almost like a way of shutting down a conversation. Like, you need therapy.
You need to read this book.
Whatever. Go and read this book. But I've found a lot of personal value from meditation, or at least I think I have. But the tricky thing is when you invest so much time in something, if you're going on retreats and meditating every day, like I try to do, it's very hard to think objectively about how it's affected your life, because obviously you have no control. I can't look at the Rebecca who hasn't been doing this meditation and say, oh, look, her life is shitty compared to mine. Meditation must be working. So I can look at things like I can say, I've got a better control of my anxiety now. Maybe that's to do with meditation, but maybe it's also to do with growing up. I don't know. Maybe it's to do with recording a podcast with Kat. It's really hard to say. And when you look at the scientific literature, you see similar things. There's problems with a lack of control groups and a lack of really clear definition of what meditation even is. So it's kind of up in the air. It's an interesting subject to look into.
Yeah.
Well, isn't there a fine line between, so we, anytime we experience something great, like we found a great restaurant, well, the people that we love in our lives, we are excited about telling them about this and sharing this good news. Then there's that, you become prescriptive and you think you know what's right for everybody around you. And this is where evangelism, we're just like how presumptive it can get. And I even a show like this, I think about every time I turn the microphone on, especially when I write a monologue, which is almost preachy. It's like, who am I to tell anybody else how to live their fucking life? I mean, and yet I love you enough to tell you what's worked for me.
That's what I mean. Oh God, this conversation is super exciting to me because I'm learning this right now, like how to talk about what you're excited about, what you're passionate about, what has worked for you, especially in those areas that have been really difficult for you, and you find some kind of breakthrough and you run into someone who's dealing with something similar. How do you share what you've experienced in a way that honors their own path and who they are and where they might go, while having integrity and not compromising on the joy that you have from finding a path that worked for you? So like, how do I talk about being polyamorous in a way that doesn't make other people feel like I know what's best for them, and that if only they would do this, they would have like the best sex of their life, which actually, Cass, it brings me back to that episode with Dr. Eric Sprankle, where he said the problem with the way culture looks at sexuality is that we think that we prescribe it. Like certain kinds of Christians will be like, the best sex you are ever going to have in your life is one where you have no premarital sex. You are in a heterosexual relationship. You don't have sex until you're married and you stay with that person for the rest of your life. That is the best sex ever. And that's the problem when that culture tells the rest of the planet that this is the way to go. This is what you've got to do. And they prescribe it to you. And even go to the extreme of saying anything but this is bad. But zooming down into an interpersonal relationship, how do you do that? Like, how do you talk about your experiences in life and what gets you excited and what works for you, and sharing it with other people in a way that doesn't communicate that you think that you know what's best, that you found the key. Right. That's condescending, that honors that there are multiple. It's not that there's multiple truths. It's just that there is no truth. It's just things work for different people. And I don't know. I'm finding that a very curious thing to approach, and how to find the words for that.
I think what we're doing, or what we're sort of getting towards, and this isn't just because of the podcast, it's because of our relationship in general as friends and talking for so long, is thinking about the nature of conversation and what conversation actually is. Because you said, how do you share things? Like, how do you share, for example, if you've had an amazing meal at a restaurant, how do you share with your friends that this was an amazing meal? And that's like a one-way thing, isn't it? You could do it on a review. You could say, this place was great, you've got to try the onion rings. Whatever, that's sharing. But a conversation is obviously two-way, and I think the way that we're thinking about our conversation is it's a vehicle for transformation. It's changing both of us as we go, which is really hard, because it means you have to do your best to try and be very, very present with what the other person's saying and what you're thinking and feeling. And try and make it entertaining for the listener as well, because we're trying to record this and make it into a podcast. But always like keeping an eye on that and watching and making sure that you're never doing that thing where you're just presenting something to someone. Because if you wanted to do that, you could record yourself saying it on their answer machine or whatever. But when you're having a conversation, that's a whole different thing, and it has to be treated differently. And I think one of the problems that we have generally with conversations is that people aren't actually having conversations. They're just presenting their positions.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's my pet peeve. Like, I just hate being in a social situation where, and this is how I call it, when someone talks at me.
Yeah.
They're not talking with me. They're not talking together with me. They're just presenting something to me. And in a strange way, it makes me feel objectified.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like I'm a depository for their brain vomit, that they don't give a fuck about what I think about what they say. They don't want to hear anything. They don't want to hear any challenges. They don't want to hear that they're wrong. Like, I was just in a situation very recently where someone was going off about crazy claims about the Bible, like just saying like, oh no, the Bible was written this way. Like, and they weren't even Christian. They were just like, oh yeah, I know that this part was true and this part was falsified, and like just making these like absurdly confident claims about the origin of the New Testament, parts of the New Testament. And I was pretty pleased with myself. Usually, like, I would let myself be talked at, because I would feel like, oh, well, they obviously feel like they need to be heard right now, so I guess I should just shut up and just give them space. But I don't know. Maybe it was the pot speaking, but like, I was like, you know what? Oh my God. I just feel so happy thinking about what happened. Like, I said to them, I was like, I don't trust you.
Wow.
They're like, what? I'm like, I don't trust you. You're speaking way too confidently about something that you have no qualifications in. And they're like, oh no, see, I had this professor once and they went on this big thing about their qualifications. And I'm like, well, you do realize you just spoke 5 minutes about a fallacy of talking about, what's the phrase for the fallacy? Appealing to not a higher power, an
Appeal
expert.
to authority.
Like, I'm like, thank you. Appeal to authority. And so I was like, so yeah, nope, you just told me a fallacy. So yep, nope, I still don't trust you. And anyway, just point being, it's, the conversation style is really important. If you want to monologue at someone, I suppose you can do that. And Cass, I can relate to you about these monologues that we're doing. Sometimes I feel like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, why am I recording what I think about the world and just assuming everyone wants to hear it? And so it's really difficult, especially in that scenario where we have such a large audience and it is very specifically one way, to like, how do you phrase
I love this.
what you're learning or what you want to share in a way that's not preachy, that accommodates the different journeys of everyone else. So it's hard, but it's a really fun challenge for me, because I like that challenge of communication, of how do you honor other people and speak to your truth and have debates and continue to keep your mind open and be challenged and continue to hear what other people are saying instead of keeping like constantly thinking about what you're going to say next. It's complicated and it's fun, but pet peeve for sure, being talked at.
Well, Kat, do you have anything to add on this subject?
No, just that I think the podcast is really helping me do that. So, being willing to have my mind changed during the podcast has been really helpful in all kinds of conversations. And actually, since starting, I found that my own conversations with my dad, for example, who's been classically particularly argumentative and but also very good at arguing, right? That was part of what you get taught to do when he was a priest. So since doing the podcast, I actually think my ability to have those difficult discussions has been greatly improved.
Yeah. Well, and I think we're talking about the very core of the issues of sharing the planet with other people with prefrontal cortexes. I mean, this is nuanced, it's complicated, and it's an art form when it's done right. Because Rebecca, when using the restaurant metaphor, in order for it to not just be an answering machine or a one-way prescription, it could feel forced, because I was trying to think, okay, how would I do that? So I'm excited about the restaurant. I go to my friend and I say, oh my God, you got to try these onion rings. It's amazing. And then so let's say that I immediately feel guilty or convicted of being a little bossy or presumptive or condescending. And I say, oh, what's a good restaurant experience you've had lately? And then it feels forced.
I wasn't necessarily saying that that's a bad thing to do.
No, I know it's tough
to share something that you're passionate about, or an experience you've had. I was just saying that's not the same as conversation. It's something else,
and there's hardly any way to make that a conversation.
It has its own value, and I think the monologues that you guys do on your show are brilliant. They're beautiful and they're thoughtful and they're great. I enjoy them, but they're not a conversation. And I think just realizing that when we're in that mode and we're trying to have a reflective conversation with someone, being like, what are my goals here? Is it my goal to convince someone of my point of view? Is it my goal to get closer to them and find out how they see the world? And probably the second one, you're going to end up having a better conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to recommend a restaurant to someone, like, I think it's just all about language, right? Like, so if your goal was that you wanted to tell someone about a restaurant, there's one way to do it, right? You could be like, oh my God, you have to go to this restaurant. It is the best. You will have never tried anything better ever in your life. And if someone said that to me, I'd be like, yep, okay. You don't care about what I like. You didn't even ask if I like this food. Like, it's very presumptuous all around. And so, like, I think it's just the finesse of language, right? Like, it's like, if this place that you're talking about, Cass, let's say it's like sushi or whatever. So like, there's a way to approach that conversation that creates an openness and like a consensuality of the buildup of that recommendation. Like, hey, do you like sushi? Yeah. Oh my God. There's this place that I went to the other day. It was amazing. I think you might like it if you want to check it out. Like, just that little like shift in language. Like, I think you might like it. Like, even like the phrase, like, you've got to have the whatever, like, is mildly like, yeah, okay. Like, calm down. Like, I'll try whatever I want. But I don't know. I'm very particular about language, but I think there's just very small finesses that we can make to language to sound less bossy or something.
Sure. Well, I hate to oversimplify, but I just think everything comes back to your own personal self-acceptance, self-love, because to the degree in which you're an insecure person, you're going to bring that insecurity into the room, into the conversation, and that's going to shape the tone of your prescriptions and et cetera, et cetera. And so I would just say, I want to deal with my self-love, knowing that I can then go out into the public, into the world, or even do my podcast and trust that I'm going to be at least less, I'm going to have all of those, the language that you just said could be bossy, et cetera, et cetera. I know that the spirit of what I'm bringing, I'm free to talk, I'm free to think, I'm free to use whatever vocabulary I want, because I trust my heart. And I also trust that if somebody doesn't like what I'm saying, they're a free agent. And going back to the question of, how do we talk to each other and why would we talk to each other? Why would we prescribe things? And it comes down to my belief in pedagogy. None of us, not a goddamn person on this planet, learns a goddamn thing without talking to another person. So, I mean, and I mean that by reading a book. I mean, that's another way of like listening to someone else tell you something that you didn't already know. So I realized that it's presumptive and to talk, but I'm just saying that somebody's got to do it, and just do it and try to do it with the best and the most humble attitude that you can muster while being genuine, and then trust everybody to take it as for what they want.
This reminds me of something Kat said on one of our episodes. It was one about mediumship. I asked her because after we'd left, I remember her saying, "Oh, I'm really convinced by the medium we just saw. You're going to have to talk me down off this ledge," sort of thing. Like she indicated to me that she really, really believed it. So on the episode, on the podcast, I said, "Oh, so what was going through your head when you said that to me?" And Kat said, "I just said that to piss you off." And I was like, yes, that's why our relationship is so great.
Wow.
Because it's honest,
yeah.
right? And we're able to be light with each other and with our own identities. And you only get that from exactly what you're saying, Cass, from that sort of that sense of confidence and feeling safe around the other person and knowing they're not going to mock you or be unkind. Like it's nice to think that we could all just go into the world and be ourselves.
Yeah.
But if the other people around you aren't cooperating, aren't making you feel safe and aren't giving you that support, then that's never going to happen. So there's two things going on. It's about how we conduct ourselves and how we build relationships that allow us to be, oh God, I sound like a hippie, but the best versions of ourselves.
Yeah, and a person of boundaries. You know, when that person, there's people that I'm not comfortable being around them, and I don't have to be. I want to go back to something that just a note to our listeners are for your information, Kat, primarily just ex-Christians and people who left the faith, and these were not wishy-washy believers. These were all in, and when they lost God, they lost everything. The bottom fell out of their life. It was traumatic. They lost friends and family, besides losing the very meaning of life that they'd built upon since they were children. So it's traumatic. And in this context, think about this. So we've got this cool restaurant we want to talk about. We found, whatever we're excited about. Well, for us ex-Christians, who have done the work, we find ourselves, and I hear it all the time. I see it all the time. I saw it as recent as yesterday that somebody said leaving faith was almost the true born again experience, or the true I got saved, or the truth set me free. And that we finally walk into the light. We come out of zombie land. We come into our own agency. We breathe the air. There is no God. It's just me and my life. And it's freeing and it's exhilarating and it's exciting as much as it is scary. But once you kind of get through the hard stuff, it's very exciting. Well, guess who I want to share my excitement with? The people I love in my life. Well, when the people I love in my life are still Christians, still believe, they're still in the same prison I just got out of. And for me to go dance up to them and say, I just got free from Jesus. It's so awesome. You should try it. And it just, not only is that not going to fly, but I'm saying, no, we shouldn't do that. But I'm also saying it's fucking sad that we can't, because the very thing that I'm just elated to be rid of, my friends and family want me back in it. And that just is like, I don't want to be around people who don't get me and can't celebrate what I'm celebrating, or don't like the same onion rings I like or something.
Silent. But don't we all get to kind of make those priorities too? Like, you get to decide what kind of qualities are important for you. Like, some Christians deconvert and they have no problem being connected to those in their lives.
Yeah.
And some people, like for me, it's a priority to be able to connect on this level. It's very difficult for me to have a close friend who is a believer. So, like, I think it's an individual thing, right? Like what your tolerance level is and what your priorities are in a connection.
Yeah.
But I think maybe your point more is like just the inability to be able to communicate that excitement in that particular dynamic, right?
Yeah, and it's tragic. It breaks my heart. I mean, because I can't be elated with the people that I love most in some cases.
Kat, do you feel sometimes I'm a bit like that? A bit, with my love of science and reason, sort of berating you with it?
Not at all. Okay, so I can really. I was silent as well because it is hard. I can see how hard it is, and you can just imagine these two people on different sides of the fence being like, "Come over to my side." No, you come over to my side. And isn't that just like the human condition? Like we're all like trying to get on the same page, but it's not possible. But the best we can do is tell our stories, have these conversations, and try to help each other. But like Rebecca, I do think like Rebecca has been very respectful about like my beliefs, other people's beliefs. And I think that's, again, partly because she's been on the other side of the fence. And it would be great if we could all have that experience. And maybe it would make us all more thoughtful about how other people see the world. And same with you guys, Marie and Cass, you've been on the other side of the fence. And I can see how hard it is to not want to shout it from the rooftops, but it's tough.
Well, I got one more serious question, and then we'll go out with some personals, unless you have something, Marie. But,
nope, I'm good.
I'm in the pursuit of joy, personal joy. I have a theory that if you're a person who you have a supernatural view of the world, meaning there's an arc of justice, there's a teleology, there's an end game. This is going somewhere. It's loaded with purpose and meaning. I'm a part of something bigger than myself. I mean, in the sense that there's a plan. There might even be there might be a God. But in general, even if I don't believe in a God, I just believe that the universe is for me, or this place was created for me, and even in a New Age sense, that I was created to view the universe because I'm what give it existence or something. And just kind of overall warm, fuzzy, this is a great place to be. And I'm part of a functioning cog machine that is headed towards, some kind of justice. And so take that as opposed to an extremely skeptical naturalist, purely scientific view of the earth, and maybe even to the point where this is all one big mistake. It's one giant fuck up. It's just millions of years of tissue and cells dividing and membranes and synapses. And here we find ourselves billions of years later. So on the one hand, the former, I expect the world to be good and fair. And then when it's not, I'm surprised by hardship. In the second scenario, or the latter, I expect life to be hard and miserable and chaotic and mean. And if I have a moment of laughter or elation or love or warmth or tears of joy, then I'm surprised by joy. So it's how I think it matters, the lens through which you see the world. And I think it affects relatively your amount of joy, because of that skepticism of like almost cynicism of like, no, this place sucks and it's brutal and it's mean. And so if and when I do find any joy, I've hit the jackpot. I've hit the lottery. Whereas the theist or the just world hypothesis type person, I just have a sense that their lives are more riddled with expectations. Thus, their life is going to be more frustrating and less happy. Any thoughts on either one of those things?
I think the just world hypothesis is kind of similar to what we were talking about with the secret. It makes it harder to be sensitive to people whose lives are not working out.
Right.
Because
Right.
you think everything is a perfectly functioning machine, which leads you to the horrible, repulsive conclusion that kids dying in Africa or wherever, people who literally had no chance in this world,
Right.
who were born with diseases, that they somehow deserved it, or maybe even if they didn't deserve it, that it's for the greater good. All those sort of things kind of come packaged with that belief. So that obviously that's the big downside I see to that. But I don't think necessarily just a materialistic view of the world has to be nihilistic. You can still have all your materialist view, and everything can be synapses and evolution and random chance. But you can still say, and in that random chance, there is beauty and there is horror, and I'm going to experience both in my lifetime, and let's see how it goes. That's how I approach. I'm trying to find this balance in place between the two, but it's tricky.
Can I just say, I've never even heard of this concept. What are you calling it? The just
world hypothesis.
I've never heard of this, and it's just kind of blowing my mind because it's a really interesting concept that encapsulates a lot of the spiritual worldviews out there without being specific enough about one in particular. Like it gives that, oh wow, that's just, that blows my mind. That's what's happening. That people think that there's a greater functioning machine, and people describe it in different ways, but they all believe that to some extent.
I think it's considered as sort of a psychological bias, and one of the reasons that people think that it's so common is because it makes you feel good in the moment, and that like it really does. If something horrible happens, like for example, if I was really looking forward to going somewhere but my car breaks down, then I think to myself, oh well, it probably wasn't that bad anyway. Like it wasn't going to be that fun anyway,
Or I
or
was going to be in an accident.
exactly,
Right.
yeah, something
Right.
horrible could have happened. So you're always like your brain's trying to make
Silver
things.
lining. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can see why it's so tempting, but once you let it define the way you think about the whole world and all your circumstances and other people's circumstances, and you see this all the time, and we see it a lot when we engage with New Age people. This is a very popular belief. In fact, maybe it's one that Kat flirts with sometimes.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those beliefs that, for the most part, I find pretty harmless. So, but then there are other times when I will go towards something that is a bit more balanced, which is everything is there is equal good and bad in the world, and it's up to us which way we want to judge it.
Yeah. So what's your experience, Kat, as far as that thing about how much a worldview, kind of a silver lining, optimistic worldview versus a cynical worldview affects your personal joy? Have you navigated any of that and had some outcome?
I'm a happy optimist. Basically, that, like, in short, I don't know how else to describe it. That's pretty much.
Well, can I ask, how old are you?
I'm 31.
Okay, Rebecca, how old are you?
I'm 35.
Okay, I'm the old man in the room, but I do. That matters to me as far as your life experience, and I consider both of you old enough to have, like, been broken on the wheels of life and had your face slapped around to where if you had any kind of naivete about, this place being safe and good, then that's been shocked out of your system by now. So, but you've also found your path of joy, and also maintained a certain level of optimism, and I'm kind of envious, Kat.
Well, it's the fact that if I was to be really objective, I'd be like, well, the world is neutral. It's going to be how we choose to see it that's going to shape our experience. And if I choose to see it on the whole more positive than not positive, I'm going to have a better experience.
Yeah. And you know what I hear in that? A little bit of like, I don't have to place a judgment on it. It just is what it is. Now, I personally am going to, you can just overcreate a narrative that could backfire. I don't know, just taking life as it comes without projecting too much meaning, just being skeptical enough or suspicious enough of your own propensity to give something meaning. That's borderline expectations, and I think expectations are destructive. What's the Buddhist thing to where the first law or rule or truth is that life is suffering, and attachment to outcome is, I guess that's the thing, is just stay a good level of disattached to an outcome that you hope happens or wish happens.
Oh yeah, I agree with that.
One thing I was thinking about is, isn't it possible to be, I think we created here some type of a binary between the optimist and the naturalist. Isn't it possible to have both within you?
Well, I think that's what Kat's saying. Yeah.
Is that, yeah, like, because I'm just thinking about Dave, right? Like I think he's generally a naturalist, our friend here who's suffering from ALS. And yet, like, I see in him this optimism, not necessarily for his own life, but about humanity. Like, I think he finds optimism in humanity. He sees what we are capable of, what we are made out of, the societies that we create, the type of supports that we are capable of creating for each other. And that has stuck out to me because I've been kind of a pessimistic nihilist, naturalist for a while now. And I think that that's an authentic place to be as well. But I think Dave's opened up my eyes to stretching myself, relieving myself of some of the jadedness that I have about my experiences with humanity, and re-acknowledging the good that we are capable of doing. And yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking about the fusion of those two together, and I guess that's what you guys are talking about, right?
Yeah, and I think that sounds like the best place to be in my experience.
Well, let's get to some light questions, and we'll again plug the show and then call it a day. Are either of you like really into any kind of Netflix streaming or Hulu or something to where you're into an episodic series of any kind?
Well, Game of Thrones has just started up again, so that's been very exciting for me.
Yeah.
And it won't surprise you to hear I'm a nerd, so I really like the Orville, which I consider the real
Oh yeah.
the real Star Trek. I don't like the Discovery thing, not interested in that. This is much truer to the Next Generation, TNG.
The Orville.
The Orville, yeah. If anyone hasn't seen it, check it out.
I've watched it with Seth MacFarlane.
Yeah. It's hilarious
Yeah.
and clever, and it has that same interesting thing where they explore moral quandaries every episode, just like TNG used to. I love it. I'm a nerd.
Cool. Now, I know, Rebecca, you have a hobby or maybe even a career of being an artist. And before I get on to Kat's question as far as her hobbies or careers, how's that going? I mean, I get to see your stuff because I follow you on Instagram, but...
Great. Yeah, well, as great as any artist's career can go. I think career is is a little kind. But yeah, I'm working on a new book, which is really exciting. And I'm developing my style, my comic style. And I'm also spending a lot of time, as you've noticed from my Instagram, doing more traditional life drawing sort of stuff. So lots of nudes, lots of more detailed observational drawing, which I hope will help me improve my comics work, because my next comic is going to be quite a big one. I think it's going to take me a couple of years to complete. It's about free will, because that's a subject that hasn't been discussed before.
Yeah, I don't know if I got to show you anything, Marie, but I've got one of Rebecca's graphic novels. And,
nope, I haven't seen that.
No, this is fantastic work, and I don't know. I guess I grew up within the church. I grew up where women were very jealous of other women, and so my exposure to Rebecca is that she paints and draws nude women all the time, live models. And I love how much you just celebrate the human body.
It's incredibly empowering as well as a woman to paint other women or to draw other women, because there are so many expectations. I mean, it won't surprise you to hear, like, there are lots of expectations on women's bodies and how we're supposed to be. But when you can kind of just relax into drawing someone, all you're seeing, or at least this is my experience of drawing, all you're seeing is light and shade. And the judgments slip away, everything slips away, and you just see the human form, light and shade. And it's beautiful because it's unencumbered with all that cultural baggage that we put on it. And at some point I started beginning to occasionally see my own body that way. And I was like, breakthrough. Yeah.
That's amazing. That is so cool.
Do you find that the models that sit for you, it's a therapeutic thing for them?
Some of them say that too. Yeah, some do. And some, it's just their job and they're very matter of fact about it. But I've had a conversation with a couple who have said, I deliberately started modeling because I was insecure about my body and I thought it would help. And it has.
Immersion therapy.
Yeah.
What about you, Kat? Do you have what do you do for a living, or what are your hobbies, or anything interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I've got another podcast called The Creative Introvert. And so my background is design and illustration, but also realizing how difficult it is to kind of get our work out into the world as introverts. So my podcast and book and blog, they're all based around that idea. So that's kind of my passion project.
What's the name of that podcast?
The Creative Introvert. Oh,
The Creative Introvert. Okay. What's this Wildfire Women that I see on your Facebook page?
Yeah, that was an event that I hosted a couple of years ago, and basically for women, basically celebrating our different careers and stuff like that.
So you're a feminist. You're one of those.
No.
Why do you say it that way, Kat?
Because I knew you were listening.
God damn it.
So, Kat, do you have any tattoos?
I don't, but I've always wanted one. I just need to work out what I'm going to get. Maybe it'll be the Seeker and Skeptic logo.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh. And I have to imagine, Kat, did you design that logo?
No, that was Rebecca.
Oh, sorry. I was getting the names mixed up. I apologize. So, Rebecca, you did that.
This is the problem with having two creative people, because Kat is perfectly capable of designing a beautiful logo too. I just got there first.
So. I do the web design stuff. I do the tech stuff.
Cool.
Well, let's see. I don't know. Do each of you share something that very few people know about you?
I don't often admit to people that I can't really swim. That feels like something that I don't normally share with people because it's usually met with looks of horror.
Yeah.
You just never got a chance?
Man, I've tried. I just can't really swim.
Yeah. Is the part of it have to do with the going under the water thing?
I think it's multiple things, but like my whole family, we all say that, us Nelligans we've just got dense bones or something because we seem to just sink.
Oh,
just sink.
You just sink. Yeah, it's the same with my husband. I think he can swim a little bit, but yeah, he talks about being he has a very dense body.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Rebecca? Something very few people know about you.
I was a very proud member of the Young Ornithologist Club as a teenager. I think I stopped being a member when I was about 12, and this was the club. It's been renamed now. I think it's just called Mad About Birds or something. But I prefer its original title, the Young Ornithologist Club. And I was a massive twitcher, and I still am. I mean, Kat knows whenever we go anywhere, she'll get lectures about all the different birds that I might see. I'm just passionate about bird watching.
It's really contagious. Like if you spend enough time with Rebecca talking about birds, since being in the States, I've been looking out for all the different types of birds, and I keep wanting to share them with you.
Yeah.
So I brainwashed her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Easily done.
Are you taking pictures of the birds and texting them back to her?
I haven't got to that stage yet. I'm still trying to learn what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've got eagles and stuff, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And my brother and sister-in-law were so much into that when they lived in Minnesota, they drove all the way to Nebraska just to see the sandhill cranes that were migrating through. They're just like thousands and thousands of them in the marshy areas on the side of the freeway, and flying through the air, just swarming in the air, and they're just all squawking and stuff. And man, they were hardcore driving all the way to Nebraska just to see birds.
Well, migration itself is just such an amazing thing. It's an incredible thing when you start thinking about it, what these birds do, and they're so small and they just go across oceans. We just had house martins arrive back in the UK from Africa, and my husband's originally from South Africa, so I've seen the places where they go in their other season. And just to think about these tiny little creatures, and they're so light, and they're making this journey across. And if you look at the shifting patterns of migration, you can see all sorts of data about the world and about climate change, and just about how we're all knitted together in a way that we're not aware of a lot of the time, because we tend to stay on our one continent or our one landmass. And it's a big deal to fly somewhere else. But birds don't see the world that way. They see the world through a whole different lens, and it's just fascinating to place yourself in their shoes.
Absolutely.
Their bird shoes.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it when we can do that and we can zoom out of our own heads, out of our own countries, out of our own boundaries, and just see the world as a larger place and realize that we don't own it at all, and there's a whole lot of other things going on, and we're all tied together like that.
Well, I just want to say that this interview with you guys it's fantastic to meet you, to talk to you. You're both brilliant. But what I want to say to the listeners is that this interview today, just now, is not an example of how good their show is, because for one thing, there's 4 people in this room right now, and we're there's a lot. But when the two of them are together, I just challenge you to go and listen to one episode, because their cadence in which they play off each other, the amount of love and respect they have for each other, the amount of honesty that they bear upon each other, I was like, this is, I don't know, it's like watching a train go by, lickety tickety 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 with that cadence, but it's also laden with graffiti, and so it's beautiful and unique. I just found the show and your ability to converse in an artful and contemplative way just amazing. You guys are fantastic. I highly recommend the show.
Thank you.
That's really sweet. That's lovely to hear.
For one moment there, I thought you were going to say it's like listening to a train wreck. So I'm glad you didn't go down that route.
No, there's just that. I'm a drummer. I'm a rhythmist, and there's a cadence to conversation, and And you know this to be true because people started taking sound bites from somebody saying something, 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 from somebody saying something. And there's a beat, And so, but the cool thing about conversation as opposed to looping it is it's jazz. It doesn't repeat. Classical music, a lot of classical music doesn't repeat, like pop music. The geniuses didn't feel the need to do verse and chorus, so an hour conversation is jazz. And anyway, you guys are Miles and Coltrane.
Well, we're enjoying doing it. I mean, we just were sitting at a cafe having a coffee, talking about astrology, and we thought, this is one of the most interesting conversations either of us had for some time. And we were thinking, both of us were thinking more deeply about the subject than we ever had before. And we thought, well, why not put it online, I guess?
That's awesome. Yeah.
Do you guys want to plug where people can find you?
Sure, go for it.
It's called The Seeker and The Skeptic. So if you just search in any podcast app that you use, you'll be able to find it there. And our website is seekerandskeptic.com.
And how many shows do you have out already?
About 12, I think.
Okay.
Our next one coming out is about sleep paralysis, which is a very creepy phenomenon that both of us have experienced. So.
Oh, yeah, my little sister's dealt with that.
Yeah, it's very scary, but very interesting when you start looking at why it happens.
Well, cool. Thanks for talking to us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
So, Cass, did you think they were awesome?
They are awesome. I love them. They're brilliant, and they really are good. None of that was smoke up their ass.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I think I listened to their show a couple months ago when we first started talking to them, but it had been a while since we'd listened to it, and so I already forgot what it was all about. And so, like, I came into the conversation today with a little bit of apprehension because I thought it was like the atheist versus like the spiritualist.
Woo-woo. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of thought that she was going to be like way off the deep end and it would be this like uncomfortable conversation. And I was like, yeah, this is just going to be like a half an hour interview or we're just going to promote their show. But I was really intrigued with Kat. Like she's open-minded in a beautiful way. Like,
yeah.
And I'm drawn to the dynamic that the two have together. And I'm really looking forward to listening to more shows, especially the one about meditation that they have coming up soon.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's a part of me that I like them so much, I wouldn't care what they were talking about. They're just good talkers and thinkers. And
yeah,
I have like a fetish for speed, the speed at which people can think and put words together.
Yeah.
And it's not like a fetish in that. I mean, it's like watching Michael Jordan play basketball or something. It's just, it's like, it's wowing because it's impressive. And it's like, oh my gosh, did you see that?
Yeah.
You know, or did you hear that? You know,
yeah.
It's just a skill that I envy, and it's fun to watch other people pull it off, and they're good at it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
What do you got doing today?
Well, what do I have? I'm going to go buy plants with Justin. Yeah. I had a birthday party last night.
Yeah. How'd that go?
I went to sleep when everyone was still here.
Wow.
Yeah, my boyfriend was spending the night and I was like, yeah, I'm done with this party. So I was like, all right, guys, I'm going to sleep. So we went upstairs and did whatever we did. And then my husband took care of getting everyone else out of the house.
Well, see, that's a case where, I mean, not only, this is the thing about, we do this WWDD thing about Dave and that, you know, because he's got a short life left, he's like, this is my time, it's precious, and I'm gonna spend it with and with the people I want and not with the people that I don't want or doing the deeds that I don't want to do. I don't, you know.
Yep.
And so here you are saying, this is my birthday, and so I'm not going to stay at this party just because y'all are here. It's my birthday, I'm going to go to bed.
Or whatever. Yeah.
What we're learning is that we don't have to wait till we're dying or it's our birthday to be people looking out for ourselves.
That's right. That's right. Because I had to think to myself, like, I was done with the party pretty early on. And I was like, okay, but I invited everyone over. And if I go upstairs right now, then it puts the onus on my husband to clean everything up and kind of get things done. But also, I'm really, really done with this party. I'm introverted. I get worn out real fast, especially if the party is at my house.
Mm-hmm.
And because you always feel like you have to be on or whatever. And I was like, I just kind of want to go upstairs with my boyfriend. And I just thought about it. Like you said, I thought about Dave and I was like, Dave wouldn't put up with this shit. And I don't want to put up with this shit. Like, I'm done. Like, I'm tired of spending any amount of time in my life trying to meet expectations, like unspoken expectations that compromise how I feel in a way that doesn't need to be compromised. Like,
Right.
I've seen people, like, I've gone to parties where the host goes to bed. Like, it's fine. Like, I don't, like, there's still someone still left to kind of wrap things up or whatever. They're just like, I'm going to bed. You guys need to leave now. And you're like, okay, that's totally cool. And everyone's cool about it. And if they're not, then fuck off.
Well, that's my point. That you do run the risk.
Yeah.
Like when you went upstairs, you ran the risk of offending somebody or looking rude. Like, you invited us here and then you leave. I mean,
yeah.
And you're willing to take that risk and you're willing to offend that person.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because they may or may not have what it takes to be your friend and to be with people who are that honest. I don't know.
No, I mean, you're right. Yeah.
By being ourselves, I think that to the degree in which I'm self-conscious around a person is the degree in which I'm deep or shallow friends with them. In that,
that's right.
I know I'm safe to be myself, and this person can handle it.
Yeah, and I think each of us can handle it differently. Like you were just saying, like, because now I'm thinking about you, like that when we hung out a month ago or whatever, like I got to spend more time with you, and I saw that behavior that you're like that like once you're done, you're just fucking done, and there is no like gracious like winding down of conversation. You're like, okay, I'm leaving now, and and then you go off and you do your thing, and I can see where some people would be like, wow, okay, cool, like that's rude. But then I look at it, given the experience that I have and the values that I'm trying to have in my life, and I'm like, okay, that felt a little weird at first, but like he's taking care of himself and he's not making himself do stuff he doesn't want to do longer than he wants to do it. And now I'm in charge of what I want to do with my space and my time, and I get to own that back, and he gets to own what he's doing, and that feels good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I also want to say to all of the depressed listeners out there who wrestle with that particular mental illness, if you will, or at least the struggle of depression and it being a part of your life. Speaking of being around people who understand, and I know it's important for probably all humans to that there should be a few people in our life who truly know us, and the warmth and the just the strength that maybe that feels to just have somebody, okay, that I know there's some people on this earth that know me and get me, and that makes me feel good. And whether that's a weakness or not, I don't really care. I just want to say to the people who are friends of depressed people, sometimes I am like, inside I am as happy as what I think is humanly possible. I'm satisfied. I'm okay with my life. I'm content with my life. And yet on the outside, it does not look like what some people think happiness looks like. It looks melancholy, in fact. And yet inside I'm elated. And that can be difficult because people could be concerned that I'm sad, and inside I'm reeling with joy. And there's that disconnect that I think probably goes on in the relationships of depressed people and their loved ones. And I don't know. I just want to speak that out.
Yeah. And we have to trust each other to know each other. So like if you're telling someone you're elated and you're happy, there's a couple ways to go with that. Someone could read into that as passive aggressive, or like that you're covering something up, or you hear that and you say, okay, he says that that's what his experience is. I don't have the capacity to question, what he's telling me about his experience in life. And so I'm going to treat it as truth until, otherwise, proven differently.
Yeah.
And that can be uncomfortable if it doesn't look like what you think it's supposed to look like.
Yeah. And I would also say in this same context that if you have feelings, you have suspicions about how one of your friends is feeling, I recommend asking them rather than just building a narrative around what you think.
That's fucking brilliant.
Well, and like you just said, and then I would hope and suggest that you just take them at their word and not second guess their motives.
Yeah.
If they say that, then just trust that they're being honest with you. And so both the ability to say, "How you doing, Cass?" and then me saying, "I'm actually fantastic. How are you?" or whatever,
Yeah.
And whatever was going on in the silence, all the thoughts and theories and suspicions and projections that were going on in the silence, like a pinball bouncing around the emotions, are dispelled by just saying, "How are you feeling?" "I'm fine." Okay, now that we just literally blew up. We smart bombed all those manic suspicions.
Yeah. Yeah, like the other night I'm like in bed with my husband and like he has this face on him that looks like he's just annoyed or sad or mad or something. And I just asked him, like you said, I'm like, "Hey, are you okay?" Like he's like, "Yeah, no, I'm fine." I'm like, "Okay, it's just like you look like you have this face like that you're mad about something." He's like, "Oh, no, I'm just tired." And he clarified how he was feeling. And I'm like, "Okay, yep, that makes sense."
Very good. Bravo.
Okay.
And he wasn't,
Yeah.
and some people will use a passive aggressive response. Like, "No, I'm fine."
Yeah.
And yet they're
Yeah.
still they're holding it in, and yet they sending you enough body language to make you pry even further. And that's just head fucking games, childish head games.
Dude, it's complicated, right? Like, cause like a couple of weeks ago, I was hanging out with my boyfriend at his house with his kid, and his kid is like teething, and the kid had like fallen and hit his jaw that day on a table, so he was not having it. The kid was, and then he was like not sleeping through the night, and he wasn't sleeping through his naps, and so my boyfriend was just really exhausted, and I was like, okay, this is what the day's gonna look like. I'm okay with this. I can support him, but like I had this like sense that he was putting up this emotional wall. He was just kind of like shutting me out. And I kept on trying to like do like what I said that I did with my husband, like, "Hey, are you okay? Is there something wrong? Is there something I can do to help?" And he kept on being very dismissive of it and like, "No, it's fine. It's just what it is." And finally I was like, "Do you want me to leave? Like, would that be better if I just wasn't here?" And he's like, "Yeah, probably." And so like it's complicated because sometimes like I don't feel like he was playing a head game with me. Like I think sometimes we have such expectations in our own heads about what we want a moment to be like, so that when we are asked how we're doing, we don't want to admit that things aren't the ideal that we want, and we can't say that. And
Right.
so it was hard for him to admit it. And so for some period of time afterwards, I was pissed. I was like, I'm in relationships to be with people who know themselves and will speak up for what they are and what they need. And then at the same time, I'm like, but I'm that way too. Like sometimes shit can be so bad that it's hard to articulate what you need in the moment until it's kind of too late and like you've already shut people out. So, and I guess I'm just trying to say that like it's complicated and it's not always mind games, and it's
right. And that,
I don't know.
Well, I could say this. I mean, there's a chance that it hadn't occurred to him yet that your departure was what he was needing. He was scrambling, he was struggling, he was trying, and maybe even didn't want you to leave, and then realized after so many attempts at other things to make this whatever situation work, it still wasn't working. And then for you to say, "Hey, do you think I should leave?" And he's like, reluctantly, "Yeah, I think that's probably, let's try that." Because something's not working, and it's okay. And that's that. Yeah. And I think these types of discussions, and this, even the fact that we're sitting here talking about giving relationship tips, or whatever, is inspired by relationships modeled by Kat and Rebecca. And I was just noticing the other day, and I brought this up with my wife. Mindy and I have been married 31 years and married young, and our origins are based on Christianity, deep-seated biblical models of marriage and such. We've been codependent for 30 years and didn't even know it. We just thought that's what romance looked like, and pop radio supports all of that.
Yeah.
So it occurred to me the other day that she and I have never even witnessed or had modeled before us what a non-codependent relationship looks like, because both our parents were. It's just kind of the way America runs romanticism. And so, yeah, there are sometimes movies or TV shows where the married couple are two powerful, independent, maybe interdependent. And that's a big deal because you have to establish complete independence. Like they don't need each other in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Their lives would go on fine without that person. And they both know it, and it's on the forefront of their mind, not even an afterthought. They know that they're fine. They have that much self-confidence and self-trust, self-dependence. They self-soothe. They, and I've only seen it in fictional scripted situations. And how else would I? Because I'm talking about being able to be a fly on the wall, almost. An intimate, reality show. Maybe if it was truly a reality show, to see how two adult people interact, how they navigate, how they solve problems, how they discuss situations, etc. As real independent adults. Mindy and I have never seen that modeled. And so to some degree, we're floundering as to what it would look like in real time for us to behave like adults. And we're learning, and we're having these very discussions that that you and I are having right now, as far as, when you walked away mad because the hug that we were in, I took my arms off your back, which gave you the signal that I was done hugging, but you kind of wanted a longer hug. And so instead of saying, hey, can we hang here for a second? I would be absolutely willing to go, well, for sure. I got nothing better to do. And
I mean, romantic.
But okay, but let's talk about that. I mean, because I was done with the hug, but if you need more, I'll do it. And I might be surprised at how much I needed more and didn't know it until we pressed back in or whatever. But by not communicating, well, actually, she walked away and said, well, I guess we're done here, which was passive aggressive. And I was like, wow, I can't win for losing. Like, I mean, in a way that just makes it impossible for me to read your mind as to how long you wanted that hug to last.
Yeah.
And instead of asking and saying, I need longer.
Yeah.
All of this is about vulnerability.
Yeah.
All of this is about taking the risk to be honest and trusting that other person to handle it maturely.
Yeah.
But here again, like, how does this play out? So we talked about it, and we were like, okay. And this is, anytime you go to couples therapy, the therapist is always going to ask you, give me an anecdotal scenario where the particular conflict that we're wanting to talk about today arose. And you start to tell them a real story, because everything else is just
hypothetical,
subjective, or hypothetical, and it doesn't work. What you need is a real situation. And fortunately, the stakes of that situation were really low.
Right.
It was just a simple little hug that didn't necessarily go as long as she wanted, and we didn't handle it well. And now we know how to handle it better. And that's why it's fresh on my mind, as far as just communicate that. And I mean, there was an example in the show just now when with Kat and Rebecca, where I can't remember what it was, but she just asked her, hey, do I ever do that to you? Because I brought up something.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, you don't. Oh, good to know.
Yeah.
And, I can't seem to get enough of communication.
Yep.
I'm almost a communication slut, if you will. I mean, I just think it's almost the panacea to me. It fixes everything. So,
yeah, I agree.
Or at least it gets you going in that direction.
Yeah, it's a good step forward. And there's, what was I going to say? Like, it does have to do with vulnerability. Like, one of the things you said is that it has to do with vulnerability and trust in the other person can handle it. I think it also has to do, if not more, has to do with your self-worth.
Yep.
To bring these things up. I think that's one of the things that stops me a lot of times from saying how I feel or asking for what I want. I feel like I'm a burden, a lot of times in interpersonal relationship stuff, like, I don't want to talk about the complex issues that I have going on in my head, or I'm afraid to ask for reassurance, but about how someone feels about me, because I'm afraid I'm going to come off as like needy.
Needy. Oh,
Yep.
totally.
Yep. Needy.
We don't want to be seen as needy.
No, like it's like, it's like my brain feels like my goal in my marriage or any of my relationships is just to be as low maintenance as possible,
Yeah.
And
In the
it's
name of maturity.
bullshit. Yeah, in the name of maturity, because I'm a grown-ass adult, and therefore this should be easy, and I shouldn't need anything, and whatever I need, I should be able to do it myself, and I shouldn't have to ask for anything from anyone else.
Yeah.
And so that's bullshit.
Yeah. That's where I think interdependence comes back in, because you've established independence, which is very much a first step for Mindy and I. Like, we have to cut the Siamese twins tendons that we've had for all these 30 years. And that's painful and hard and takes years. Yep. Mm-hmm. And then now trusting ourselves to come back into a situation where no man is an island. Mm-hmm. Like, we need each other. Let's go there. Mm-hmm. Let's just talk about it. But can we do that and meet that need in a way that is not codependent?
Yeah.
But just we have a need, and it's okay to ask for that to be met sometimes by another person.
Right. Like, another example is, in the last couple of weeks, I've been feeling disconnected from boyfriend number 2, because like I'm learning things about him. Like, if he's super stressed out, he needs a lot of space, whereas I'm very connecty. I like being connected, especially when I'm stressed out. I like connecting. It's just who I am. And so when he ended up taking some space for a couple of days, I was really like worked up and like internalizing a lot about what that meant about me, and like whether he actually loved me, that he could stand, not being super connected over 4 fucking days. How could you even bear it if you really loved me?
All the while your pinball is bouncing around your head and creating a spider web of narratives.
Oh man, it was bad. Yeah. And I was like, okay. And I think one of the things I'm grateful for is that at least I had the awareness to be like, wow, something's really happening inside of me. This isn't about him in so much as this is an opportunity for me to learn who he is, because all the data points to he loves me.
Yep.
You don't need to worry about what this means. And this is an opportunity to get to know him, because he has this characteristic you haven't seen in a partner before. Yeah. And so I was able to recognize it as an opportunity to honor who he is, to know who he is, so that we can work together better in the future. And at the same time, to recognize the opportunity to see an insecurity in me about when a partner isn't connected all the time, how that makes me feel, and where does that come from, and how can I challenge that? And so I had to deal with some dark thoughts and dark days for a little while there, with a modicum of awareness around what was happening. And so finally, when I was able to connect with him today and be like, hey, this is what went through my mind during that time. I'm looking for some reassurance or some clarification on what was motivating your separation and why that was there. Like, and he was able to explain how he functions. And he's just, he has got a limit on how much stress that he can deal with. And he had 2 big stressors going on. And so he just needed to focus on that and spend time alone and like really, really alone. And so I was like, I don't relate to that. That's hard for me to accept, and I accept it. So I'm going to have to work through it, and I might need some reassurance from you in the future and ongoing, because I know that this is a sensitive area apparently for me. I don't make him own it. It's not his responsibility that I feel insecure in moments like this. And so anyway, it's a ongoing thing, I think. But I savor those moments where I find something that's really uncomfortable and say, what is this? What can I learn from this? And I don't know, this is now a tangent. I don't even remember what we were talking about before that, but
let me just say something on that line, and that is, and you've taught me this, is that the value of being or just acknowledging in a partnership to each other, we are not, there is no ball and chain. We are not tethered. Marriage doesn't exist. We are choosing to be here because whatever. I mean, I love you. I mean, something about you being in my life enhances my life in a way that I want more of it.
Yeah.
And so here we find ourselves, but we both know that we don't need each other. And if you decided you didn't need me and yet I still, you didn't want me and yet I still wanted you, I would not dig my claws in and make you stay or even try to. You're free to go. I'm free to go. And that's that independence, such that if something, which is very normal, by the way, for a person to say, I need space both to protect others from me right now because I'm Bruce Banner and the Incredible Hulk might hurt people. And so I'm going to withdraw for others' sakes and for my sake, because I need silence. I don't need advice right now. I don't need small talk. I don't need banter. I need silence. And I need to go inside my own head, and I need as much, space and clarity in order to navigate and sift through these thoughts, or why I'm depressed, or why I'm angry, what goals are being blocked, et cetera, et cetera. So withdrawal is fine, but the anxiety can come from, and I'm not sure this is what's going on with you because you're very evolved in this sense, but one place that anxiety could come when a person withdraws from us and we start to take it personal is that we panic they're about to leave us. But if you've already established in your heart and mind that, number one, I'm fine without them, and number two, they're fine without me and I wouldn't go after them, then all right, let's say that he is about to leave me. I'm not saying you have to be a zombie, insensitive, and have no nerve endings on your heart.
Right.
But the thing about grief is that we grieve, and we know we're going to grieve that, and that ain't fun. But we've grieved enough other things that we know we're going to be fine on the other side.
Yeah.
And I know this is like taking, human maturity to an ideal level that the $6 million man is not capable of. I mean, like this is not real. Jesus Christ couldn't be this mature. But it's at least idealist. I mean, it's at least a goal to set for and to say, I need to talk about these things because I'm 53 and I've been a codependent little boy for the first 50 years of my life.
Yeah.
And how now shall I live? And I was listening to an episode recently where Brene Brown was on Mark Maron's WTF podcast.
Oh,
fan-fucking-tastic. I highly recommend
bet.
And because of the timing of these shows and when they come out, it came out back in April, late to mid-April, or you can trace back. Brene Brown. Anyway, Mark starts complaining about how he was in his 50s before he began to deal with some arrested development and some childish behavior that he was still manifesting as a grown man. And there was a little bit of shaming there. And of course, you know how she is with shame.
Yep.
She just said, look, the research shows that it's very, very typical, if not normal, for people in midlife. It finally catches up with them, some of the unearthed business that went on in their childhood that they are now ready to deal with. And it's okay that it's just now coming up. There's nothing retarded about that. There's nothing, delayed about that. That's just perfect timing, Ted, where you're now ready to deal with it. She didn't use that language, but it was a way to just say, no, this is normal for this to come up in midlife. And I think for our entire lives, stuff comes up, unfinished business, rocks we haven't turned over, and bitternesses and resentments that we're still carrying around that are making us and keeping us an angry little baby on some fronts. And
well, don't you think one of the biggest fallacies is thinking that we'll ever grow up and be whatever an adult means?
Yeah. Adulthood is a myth, is a pretty common thing. And you know me, I mean, I had such a toxic version of immaturity, though, that I would not be honest with you or my public or myself to just say, no, it's fine to stay immature. It wasn't for me. It was destructive. Sure. I was hurting the people around me. I was hurting myself by remaining okay with being boyish.
Sure.
And it manifested, and it's still manifesting in my life, and I'm working through it. And yes, there are places where I allow myself to do something that others looking in might say, well, that's really not appropriate for a 53-year-old man. Like, I play a lot of cards on my computer, but it's just like crosswords. It's a tourniquet on my monkey brain and it feels good. And I kind of need a break from, things. And so I give myself that break, and I don't need anybody's permission to do it.
Definitely
because
not.
I'm the steward of my own health.
Yeah.
and it may not be healthy, but I'll figure that out. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So even even the things that we're doing, yes, we're managing and we're navigating our pathologies, our health, and and doing the fucking best that we can and making mistakes all along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. I just don't think that there's any kind of like nirvana adulthood. Like, I'm not saying that you should be okay with your immaturities and just hang out there. But I think that, right. I think in our culture, we just think that we're just, at some point you become an adult. And I think in this adulthood means like that you're perfectly emotionally evolved, that you've got everything figured out, you got your finances figured out, you've got your 2.5 kids. Like, there's these expectations of what adult means, and the adults that we had in our life when we were kids, we probably projected that onto them. We figured that they had it all figured out.
Yep.
And so then when you get into your mid-teens, early 20s, and you get to see these adults as more human, you're like, I was disappointed.
Yeah.
I was like, these aren't adults that I want to look up to. Okay, I'm going to be the adult that I want to be. But then even still, you go through that. I went through this disappointment of like, this isn't the kind of adult I'm supposed to be, right? This is not who I thought. My mind is not the place that I thought it would be at the age of 37.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I thought I would be a lot less, like, have a lot less fears, have a lot less hangups. Like, at a certain point, you were expected to release all this shame and like whatever you want to call it, childish insecurities. And I think that ends up, and I don't think it's realistic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's human
mm-hmm.
to expect any of those things to go away and to be any less human than you are.
Mm-hmm.
And don't even get me talking about ageism and like how we're going to still have this stuff well into our later years.
Yeah.
And I think that these expectations of us to be some kind of perfect adult lands us all in a position
mm-hmm.
synonymous to where we were in religion, where an expectation was set that is unrealistic. And since we can't meet that, we are just burdened with shame,
mm-hmm.
and shame can often paralyze.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we are disempowered
right.
to seek betterment, even if it's imperfection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
shitting on ourselves the whole time.
Yeah, so fuck shame, fuck adulthood, whatever the fuck that's supposed to mean.
Yeah. Well, and fuck the insecurity that, like, I could be sitting in an intersection with these cars all around me, and I can be looking around, and of course, there's all kinds of range of cars. There's a $60,000 car at this same stoplight, and there's a $2,000 piece of shit, and I'm somewhere in between. But there's also like, I just imagine, okay, there's this couple, or there's this guy, there's this woman, and they've got their life in order. They've got a great job. That car's paid for. They have their kids all went off and became lawyers and doctors. It's just, you can project the Joneses are fucking rocking it and you are sucking air.
Yeah.
And that kind of fear of missing out and insecurity and inferiority complex is debilitating to the self-acceptance that's required for you to even have a moat of happiness. Is a moat a word? a mite. I don't know.
A mite. I could see there being a moat.
That's a body of water around a castle.
Yeah. Yeah. Happiness can protect you or something in your castle of your mind. I don't know.
I just know I had to get there. And then and then I have to be careful of other people in my life who are friends and family who are they're wagging the same finger at me that my own mind is doing. And I don't need any help shooting on myself. And you shoot on me for a while and you're going to lose that status as my friend.
Yep.
Because I can't be in an environment that has already caged me into the very cage I'm working my ass to get out of.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think we do know. Everyone is not agnostic. We do know.
Oh, that's true. We know that. We know that we're fucked. We're a mess, and that we're a giant mistake, making mistakes.
We're a beautiful mess. We're a beautiful
mistake. We're perfectly imperfect.
Yeah, and I think just all this shame that we embed into our being is just fucking pointless. There's no one shaming us. What is the fucking point? Like, it's already hard enough to live. Why would we add these narratives onto ourselves to make life harder?
Yeah, totally.
It makes me angry. And it's not because I've gotten over it. It's still very much consuming.
No, I would say your anger would be propelled by the fact that you're still a victim of it to some degree.
Spot on.
Hey, and we can't go a whole episode without saying the word sex. And I don't know.
Sex.
But
I had some this morning. That's why I was late. Sorry.
The reason I bring this up is that one of the ways that as a 53-year-old man, I have felt, childish or whatever, is I'm still a horn dog after 53 years. And of course, some friends of mine, I've never done this, but a friend of mine, he was close, intimate friends with an old man, like in his 80s. And, he's got erectile dysfunction. He hadn't had sex or even jacked off in maybe a decade. But he asked him, he's like, does that, because I think maybe a pretty girl walked by or something. And he was like, do you ever get over just, craving, sex, or at least just really drooling over the anatomy of another human being?
Yeah.
And the guy said, nope, never do. And so
he still had his drive, but
you still just look at a woman's body in his case, or a man's, whatever you're attracted to, and just go, God damn, that's delicious looking, or whatever. You still have that.
Yeah.
That's still that celebration of beauty, the lust, for lack of a better word. And so this ageism of like, well, you're gonna mature to where you're not just a horn dog, then that's fucking a myth.
Why would you? Like, why do we have all these narratives? Why would you expect why is that a good thing?
Mm-hmm. Well, because I think Puritanism and religion, for one thing, it makes it look like a low character, a thing of low character.
It's not.
Right. No, hell no. We know that. But.
In fact, the more I'm learning about it, the more I think you have to be evolved to like really. No, I don't know if I want to say it this extreme, but I'm going to say it anyway. Like, I think you really have to be evolved to really enjoy sex, to participate in it, to really get lost in it, because it takes a lot of effort to shed all these narratives that we've been given about it. Right. And so to enjoy it to any extent that it has evolved to be without any of these external narratives on it, I think it takes fucking talent and emotional intelligence to back out of that shit and then just be present with your body and to enjoy what evolution has given us in terms of our ability for pleasure. Like, that's fucking evolved.
And science would support your theory there, because psychologists have said that the best and the most present sexual partner is the person with the most self-respect. I mean, chew on that for a while. Yeah. I mean, that's what you're talking about as far as I respect myself. I respect my sexuality. I respect my body. I respect I'm here and I've said yes to it. And so I'm bringing it all. And the sounds that I make and the smells that I produce and, whatever, all these narratives that could be sources of shame and they bounce right off a self-respecting person. And so that person's getting on with their orgasm, buddy.
Yes and no. I mean, like I have an immense, I don't know. I'm working on my self-respect. There's having self-respect for yourself, and then there's contending with what you're still holding on. I don't think we can ever fully release the shit that we were given. I think that's, again, that falsehood of ever becoming an adult. I don't think there's any nirvana. There's working with what we have and getting rid of, discarding in so much as you can that toxic shit.
That's fine. That's fair. But I would warn.
But you don't like.
Well, here's the thing. I'm leery of the nobody's perfect argument. Because it lets you off the hook of having to do some of the hard work that you're being confronted with, or at least where if you come into a self-awareness that is daunting and you say, well, nobody's perfect, and you settle right back down into complacency. I mean, it's a fine line between relaxed self-satisfaction and acceptance of what I am right now.
But I don't believe that nobody's perfect just because it suits me. I believe it because I think that's true. Like whether there's consequences for other people, if other people are abusing that belief or whatever to be lazy, to not work on themselves, it's not my fucking problem. It doesn't make it any less true or any more false. It's true because it's true that nobody is perfect, like it or not.
Yeah, but even now, like, is that tone you just took, is that defensive?
Yeah, it is, because I think you're wrong and I want to fight you on it.
Okay, that's fine. Oh, all right. I gotta go, man. My sciatic nerve is killing me. I gotta stand up and stretch.
Oh yeah, my shoulder hurts. I'm gonna get a massage somewhere.
All right, then. We'll go take care of ourselves because we're big pant people.
Yes, we are. See you later.
See ya.